The separation of religion from politics is just impossible. If you have any ethics, they're of a religious nature. Because if whatever you believe, it's going to be a belief system. And the fact that it's based on a book doesn't change it. If you're some type of socialist, you believe that things should be a certain way. I don't believe Christianity is kind of nice, that's why I believe it. No, I believe it to be the truth. People tend to believe things that are to be true and then want to see them implemented.
Truth doesn't fulfill their immediate pleasure or how they think things should be. If you go to therapy, you will have resistance. The church is not the institution that should change. It's the people that should change that will benefit from, and the whole society will benefit from.
And this is what should bind not just the family, but the entire community together. Ultimately, nations and all of mankind.
Monarchy have always been under God. The king has always been under God. That's just how it is. You can't change reality. When you change reality, it will become very, very dark and upside down, and people will push something else.
You will orient yourself towards something and build around that. Whether that's yourself or God or the idol you've made for yourself, that's irrelevant to the fact that you will worship something. You're religious by nature.
If you take the other position, if you're a Unitarian or you don't believe in it and so forth, you have more problems without the Trinity.
Yeah. The multiplicity and unity problem.
Exactly. That's very crucial because that is how reality works. If God is the starting point, God is like the blueprint of everything.
Yeah, another thing we tend to mistake, it's not that God is anthropomorphic, it's that man is theomorphic.
Ridiculous nowadays, the atheists, they believe in more unlikely things like aliens, scientific, sci-fi stuff. In every heresy, there is also a bit of truth.
You need some bait. You can't fish with an empty hook. We're seeing also the materialistic, naturalistic paradigm being broken as we speak. In a way, I don't think that can be a very bad thing, because that doesn't mean, materialism isn't true. Well, I'm a Christian. They can be all sorts of things. They can go to New Age, Islam, they can go to deistic positions and stuff to try and salvage it, because it is a compelling worldview. It has its problems, I think, critical problems that undo it, but at the same time, it's not just nonsense. In the scientific realm, and I've talked about this quite a bit, the problem of abiogenesis is so bad. You have people like Richard Dawkins who says, grant me only this miracle. No, you don't get that. Not only can we not get like this protocell in a lab through what is called prebiotically relevant means, which means you can get all sorts of proteins and synthesize them through biotic means, which means getting them from like plants and animals and stuff. Yeah, but if you're getting the first one, there is no plant to produce the protein or whatever that's necessary. So we don't know how to get even the constituent parts necessary. And then, even when we do get the parts, through, again, means that would not be available on prebiotic Earth prior to life being, we don't know how to assemble them. And we don't know how to fulfill the most minimal circumstances. We're not even remotely close to it. Because entropy is what governs the world as far as the scientific view is concerned. So any order that arises is an exception to the rule. And when you get such high order as to get life, that destroys everything, they would still rather believe this or believe in aliens, if you will, panspermia, and we're seeded by aliens and stuff. Okay, how did the aliens come about then?
This sounds quite strange, maybe for some. I don't know if I should. So, let's go with it. People can take it how they will. When I was 14 years old, I saw in the sky. Hello, I'm your host, Matthias Lidborn. This is the Metanoia Path Podcast. Hello and welcome back to the Metanoia Path Podcast with me, your host, Matthias Lidborn. For today's episode, episode 5, we will be joined by Sava, also known as Posh, from the Posh Redneck YouTube channel. He is a linguist, debater, and a Serbian Orthodox Christian. In this episode, we touch on a variety of different topics, all this through a lens of a linguist, where we explore language, meaning, spiritual experiences, tradition and culture, and so on. No matter if you are interested in psychology or philosophy, and maybe want to learn more about Orthodox theology, but also to learn and realize how much words and language affect our understanding and how we perceive the world. So no matter what your interest is or what you are searching for in these topics, I can greatly assure you that you will enjoy this episode, but also have gained more knowledge that will be of use for you. So here's the episode. Enjoy. Hello and welcome to the Metanoia Path podcast with me, Matthias Lidborn. And today we have a really special guest here, the Posh Redneck. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
As well as coming on, and we can just start off by you maybe explain your name there. I don't know your real name. Is it Saba or is it yes? Yeah, it's right. Yeah. Okay.
Right. So Sava is it's not actually a common name in Serbia, but it's a well-known name. The patron saint of Serbia is Saint Sava. From the dynasty of Nemanjić. He was the youngest son of the founder of the dynasty of Nemanjić, and he fled home to join a monastery, became a monastic, stayed there his entire life. He didn't care for his title as prince and stuff. Ultimately, his father joined him as well. The king, but he wasn't actually a king, he was a Grand Duke. And nearing the end of his life, and starting the process that will be continued throughout quite a bit of the dynasty, nearing the end of his life, he would abdicate the throne and joined the monastic order himself. So, it wouldn't cause the inheritance crises that were common throughout most of the world. Became known as Saint Simeon the Mare Flowing. And they founded the monastery, the one Serbian monastery on Mount Athos, known as Hilandar. So Saint Sava, he is known as the patron saint of education in Serbia, also of hospitals, because he still had access to the funds that would be available to a prince, and he used it to build a lot of churches and monasteries, which also functioned as schools and hospitals. He also bought the building that the Last Supper was held in, but it was destroyed in one of the Crusades. I can't remember which exact one. So that was also part of the Serbian church. He became the first Archbishop of the autocephalous Serbian Church. Again, that's my name. Now, if you were asking about the Posh Redneck name, which is slightly less sophisticated.
Yeah, because quite funny. I saw a picture on your Instagram, like this Serbian redneck with I don't know, handling ignore the demi suit with the straps and
and straw top hat.
Yeah.
So the joke behind that is I'm both in some senses quite a fancy fellow, and on the other hand I am a complete country bumpkin. So
especially to balance it out.
So yes, I've nothing in the middle. That is reflected in my taste in music, my taste in art, and everything. I love country music and I love Baroque. Sorry?
Serbian country music.
No, like country music.
Like real redneck music from the US.
I also love what would be the equivalent of Serbian country music, but it was just a funny thing, connecting these opposites. I end up being called just Posh, so that redneck part gets dropped, and I sound like I'm being rather pompous. But So that backfired a bit, but you can't plan for everything. But that's just it's just funny. I'm not the first person to try to make a joke by connecting opposites. Uh, it is reflective of my personality, honestly.
Yeah. And you seem to handle that very well. Like you have this side of uh, intellectual magnitude, or how to say it, and also you're very down to earth, it seems. So yeah, I think it's reflecting that. Anyway, for you guys who's watching this and don't know who Posh or Sava is, yes, we will call you Posh in this episode. So I will tell the audience what I know about you and how I came to find you. What I know about you, you're a linguist, and you're living, and you're a Serb, and you're living in Serbia. And
Yes.
I think you have been living there for all your life, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And I found you through Andrew Wilson's The Crucible debate channel.
All right.
Yeah, quite long time ago. I think it's like I don't know, about maybe 2 or 3 years or something like that. I'm not sure. So I was, but I watched his channel because I was in a period I wanted to see different perspectives. Atheism versus Christianity and Orthodox Christianity. Also wanted to do. I dwelled down to debates between Christians and Muslims and so forth.
Right.
So I don't remember exact what debate it was, but one debate that always come to mind is this debate between you and Matt Dillahunty that
Right.
many Christians have debated. Also, Jordan Peterson actually have debated him.
Yes, I know.
Yeah. So that was a good one. It's and I really liked it. But I rewatched it for a couple of months ago because now I understand the topics and the arguments more better. So it became quite clear that
Yeah. That was on the Modern Day Debate channel. I got that through the Crucible. So James, the person who runs it, asked Andrew to contact me for my contact info and set it up. The debate was. I understand also that Matt was contacted the day before, so he was also not in the best mood. He was sort of, quickly called up for it and stuff. So there was not a lot of preparation. But my debate style is not the classic debate style. That's probably to do with the fact that I've been told that this is more common with us who are cradle Orthodox as opposed to converts, because we didn't grow up with the mindset that you have as a Protestant or as a Catholic, which is more what we would call propositional. Instead of what we emphasize in Orthodoxy, it's the participative side of the faith. With Protestantism, you get a lot of emphasis on evangelism, which is a good emphasis to have. I'm not saying this to in any way criticize it, but you are put in a place, these verses show that you're saved by faith alone. These verses show that, and you can bring them up, you learn them by heart, and you bring them up in a polemical sense. So, and Catholics sort of develop as part of the Counter-Reformation, a similar approach. You just bring these verses up in response to that, and these verses prove that the Pope is the head of the Church, and this isn't the approach we have in Orthodoxy. It's not about bringing up some verses because we think in terms of narrative structures within the Bible. It's not, it cannot be reduced to verses because there's no just the idea, okay, this verse means this. It can't be reduced to it because then you would have all these interpretive structures. It's you mentioned Jordan Peterson, but there's also Jonathan Pageau, who's a close associate. With him, who is also a former Protestant, you see the transformation into an Orthodox way of thinking. Now he brings it all the way to quite an artistic approach. He is an artist himself, and I dabble in arts, but I'm not a professional artist. So, but you see how it actually works. So when you talk about salvation, you don't talk about, you either have penal substitutionary atonement or you have theosis. We would reject penal substitutionary atonement. We would accept theosis. But again, that's not how you approach it. There's this whole history of how God works within humanity, all the way from Genesis up to Revelations. And if you can't absorb the approach, the entire thing, you will not understand why we believe what we believe, why we act the way we act. So every time I debate, I also turn it into trying to, create this perspectival shift, or at least the understanding of our position. I don't care if people see me as being successful in a debate in terms of rhetorical domineering, because it doesn't matter. In some debates, that's very important, especially in the political realm, because, and I've debated some political philosophy like libertarianism and stuff, and there I'm far less instructive in my approach. I'm more combative. But as far as religion is concerned, I'm very much more concerned with getting orthodoxy across to the audience and to the person I'm debating than I am in rhetorical point scoring, because I can't see a different approach. I can't just say, well, James 2, faith without works is dead. Do you not see now how man is saved by works, also not by faith alone? It doesn't sit well with me, but that's part of being cradle orthodox. It's also participative. It's also just go to church, just attend the services, fast, pray. That's what Christianity is about. God will not be reduced to propositional statements. God will not be reduced to argumentation. And this is where we see the places where Catholicism would sort of become too philosophical, to the point that they rely more on something like Aristotelian metaphysics than on the mystical tradition of the church. They're just not comfortable with sitting with the mystical side. They sort of need more. We need to explain why this is like that. What exactly the Eucharist is, how we can explain. Oh, it's the accidentals. These things are transformed. These aren't. These would seem to be transformed. It's just not our mindset.
No, exactly. And that approach I also have that, because as you said, it doesn't stick with you either, that you can just bring up these words and quote mine and everything and do these polemics, because it's astray from the spheric truth. You know what I mean? Because as you said as well, the practical part is very, very important. And that's something I think for myself, how I did it in the beginning. I always have this approach. I more or less have it. Always, I see it's always you need the internal and external. So for me, I have read a lot of Carl Jung in the past, and he have many seeds of truth, but many things I don't agree with, and that I see is I have a divergence, But he has been a good converter into Christianity, actually. But when I started to do something, I'm very careful to not just do the one part. You need the internal and external. You need the experience, and you need the intellectual part. So what I did with Jung, I actually went into psychoanalysis with a Jungian, and that was not because of I felt like I needed work on myself, particularly in my psyche, or I had a depression. It was because I wanted the whole experience. I wanted to know if I'm going to know, if I'm going to discover something in the core of this, I have to do that. And the same I also did with, of course, Orthodox Christianity. When I approached it, okay, if I'm going to do this, I have to call the priest in my neighborhood. So I did that, and then I worked that way, because I see if I hadn't gone in that early stage to the church, it would take a lot of time to understand things, because you can't just sit in your own head and think about this and watch not movies, YouTube clips and debates and philosophical lectures and read your books and read the Bible by your alone. It doesn't work that way, because you get this little crumble at the time when you're ready, when you're in the church. It's this really slow process, and I really love it. It's like in the liturgy. You're yearning for it, but then when it's when 2/3 have gone by, it's like this. Okay, my feet is
Your legs start.
You can't separate those two. It doesn't work. You need to be, because this is something many do in the beginning as well, and I understand it. That you just look at. That's how I do it as well. I always take the position of the position that I don't wish to be true, to combat the thing that I have an intuition that is true. And when I do that, I can see that when you do that in the beginning, it's you take these verses and you look at them very concrete way, but that doesn't work either. As you said again, you need a whole net of, the whole context, and all this. Then everything connects. You need that perspective, holistic perspective. I don't like that word because it's watered down in the New Age and so on. But holistic. So in a Christian context and historical context and so forth. So this is one thing that is very, I think is very interesting to see your perspective as a linguist, because this is what something that, because you caught my attention, because you were a linguist and you speak very equivalent. I think that's the right.
Eloquent.
Thank you. Eloquent, and and also as a linguist, just not etymology,
right,
word, but you understand the historical part of the word, and how just like symbols, they in a different context they have different meaning or impact on that in a particular situation, or when you have it in a context in a different historical period and so forth. So this was for me, it's really interesting. And so, if you could speak a little about because I can imagine that as a linguist, you're maybe used to it, but as a linguist, you can get quite irritated maybe on when words is used in very, as I'm doing right now with my particularly strange English here. So I think you know what I mean. So can you speak a
Yes.
little about that? Yeah.
Right. So to the first part of what you were talking about, it's not new to Orthodoxy. It's not like we saw the Reformation and then the Catholic Counter-Reformation and we said, well, we don't want any part of this. That wasn't the mindset behind emphasis on praxis, or what we would call orthopraxis, right? The practice of orthodoxy in terms of attending services, in terms of fasting, almsgiving, and things like that. No, you can go all the way to Saint Anthony the Great, and he says that any instruction in doctrine is only useful to the extent that it aids your life in the church. So, because that is the point of what's happening, it's not about making good arguments. Arguments are good for apologetics. Arguments are good for trying to convert people, and that's excellent. That's good. But in the end, we believe in the transformative power of the sacraments, of prayer, etc. We believe in what we call theosis. That is achieved and achievable both by the illiterate peasants and the highly educated bishops. That doesn't matter. It's about participating in the what we would call the energies of God, the grace, the mercy, the love, and it's transformative. And that is what renders you a Christian, not about accepting or denying certain propositions. And as I said, that is the ancient view of the church, and why understanding this, it bridges the gap of saying, there's a criticism in Protestantism how you can't expect an illiterate peasant to understand all of this fancy theology. They don't need to. No one's expecting that of them, especially in the times when a copy. There was a calculation done a couple of years ago. It would be more now, but that one copy of the Epistle to the Romans would cost the equivalent of $5,000, right? And I try to make a comparison to people like, for $1 you can buy a notebook and a pen. And imagine how many times you could write out the entire Epistle to the Romans to fill up the notebook. And so we take certain things for granted. But to the second part of your question, the linguistics and the etymology, once I really got into it and applying it to the biblical exegesis, it really opens your mind. There's the doctrine in Protestantism called the perspicuity of scriptures. And to be perspicuous means to be obvious and easy to understand, right? It's something that they have to believe if they're going to have this sola scriptura or scriptures alone approach, where you can go and read the thing and the Holy Spirit will reveal everything to you. But it becomes a game, basically, not in a good sense. It becomes a game in the sense that you believe that you get everything right because you're approaching it with a good heart. You're approaching it with faith, so you can't be wrong because the Holy Spirit will not lead you astray. But then you get the practical, manifestation of this approach, which is you've got all these different Protestant churches which have different understandings of things, of crucial things, even not even the minutiae, although you can't escape. If you say the scriptures are perspicuous, it doesn't really matter if you're misunderstanding a small detail or something crucial to your salvation. Because
that's on Paul's. Yeah, sorry, it comes down to this is the same with the internal and external. They don't got the tradition, because that's something that is very, very important. Because Jesus was having his disciples, and the apostles, and from the apostles the tradition go over to the church fathers and so forth. So there is a lineage from Jesus. Yes. Not just the arbitrary and you're in the grip of spiritual delusion when you think you're not under authority of someone that is higher above, and you need to listen. But the authority is doing his job, so to say. He is also caring and giving to the lower parts of the church, so to say.
Right. There are parts of the scriptures in the New Testament where, Jesus says, where St. Paul, for example, says, what we've taught you, both by word of mouth and by writing. So, again, not bring up a single verse and say, well, there you go, now you need to become Orthodox. But there's a practical reality that's being shown here. Father Josiah Trenham, who's very popular in the English-speaking Orthodox world, and I'm very impressed by the man. But he says, you've got St. Paul in Ephesus, he's there for 18 months. And all we get is just a couple of pages of writing. He didn't sit there teaching people daily, and that the only thing he told them could be reduced to a couple of letters. There's a practical part of it as well. If you, since we're talking about linguistics, you have very few things in academia are as muddied as biblical studies. There's a very great incentive to try and be innovative and create all sorts of new ways to view things. That's how you get your papers published and articles in different publications, by bringing something new to the table, a new way to look at this. And this plays out into many political realms, which we won't get into now. People were being converted. There's a reason why catechism would last for years and years. And nowadays it's not uncommon for it to last only a couple of months.
Sorry to break in there. Yeah, that was something for my own process there. I have actually, I don't know if I said it to you, I haven't got baptized yet. But very early on, both the deacon and my priest, they asked me if I was ready.
Right.
But I postponed it a very long time because I know that I take it very seriously. So I don't want to do it lightly. I don't do things lightly in that way, especially something like
like baptism.
Yeah, the whole thing, But anyway, so my priest, he laughed and he said, "Yeah, it's okay. It in the olden days it took 6 years was common. So
right.
But a couple of
I have to comment on that. First of all, you will never be ready. It's sort of like the thing about it is that God is very good and God is very kind and merciful. I understand your disposition is you generally think. I'm telling you, bro.
I know what it means. It's good intention there, Posh. But
I'm using the ended there, what I tried to say. Yeah. So I have been back and forth with very very detailed things and so forth on competitive in myself, but I have come to realization, when you come to okay, this I'm certain about this, but then some things maybe come up, and take my little time here. Not that I back off. I still go to liturgy and vespers and so forth, but then like 6 or 7 months ago, it just clicked, and it's for me it was actually okay. It just like it's very hard to explain, but it just clicked and everything was right. And as I told you, we were supposed to do this a couple of weeks ago. But yeah, and then my deacon asked me if I wanted to come along to a monastery with the bishop and some monks there and spend the night and so forth. And he said to me, yeah, and as you know, you can. The bishop is very knowledgeable, so you can ask him whatever he complicated questions you have. And I just said, I don't have any questions, not anymore, not one. So the thing is, I was going to tell my priest that I was gonna get I was ready to get baptized, but it's the Christmas times and everything. I want to wait till it's calming down. It's quite a big parish, so
Oh, good to hear.
really great.
So, as far as catechism in the olden days was concerned, first of all, there's a practical element of ease of access. We're no longer primarily a rural civilization. We're primarily urban. Probably even more the case in Europe than in somewhere like North America, but still, this is a matter of margins. And then, over there in Scandinavia, even more so concentrated due to the weather and stuff. And we drive around in cars and public transport. So there's a practical element of how easy it is to access your priest, your deacon, via internet or phone call or whatever, and ask your questions. But catechism is not primarily an intellectual practice. It's about learning about living an Orthodox life, learning about services, learning, and I don't just mean in terms of the liturgy we have on these days, but what is the meaning of the readings that are done on certain holidays, on certain days of certain Sundays of the regular church calendar, learning about fasting, getting a prayer rule established, etc. Another thing is why it lasted so long. You were converting pagans, and not your modern day pagans, where you have your Odin and your Thor, and they're more like archetypes. No, they were seen as actual entities. You had to worship by means of sacrifices, by means of ritualized worship, and practices that were pretty normal in pagan societies, which we see absolutely horrid nowadays, due to this Christianization of different places, not just Europe, obviously, but the Middle East and North Africa and the rest. We forget that you're trying to bring this person into the mindset of the church, into the mindset of Christianity, and to rewrite the hard wiring that is done by paganism took a longer time than to do it with someone who's, an atheist or an agnostic nowadays. That's why part of the reason why it doesn't take as long. It's not about thinking, well, I need to do everything, and then when I'm ready, when I've achieved this certain level understanding or mastery of theology or whatever, then I can get baptized. No, once you get baptized, it doesn't get any easier. As far as I know, I wouldn't be able to tell you I was baptized on my first birthday. So I didn't do a lot of study prior to that. Again, the cradle Orthodox thing. And but here's also another thing. That's why we have this strange relationship with Protestants who would say things like, well, you need to know your theology, you need to know what you're being baptized into in order to accept the baptism, which is what we call, infant baptism. It's a whole theological controversy. We just don't see it that way. Like, we see baptism as transformative. Who knows? You can affirm things verbally, but not have the same understanding of the words themselves. And a practical problem is, like, what do you do with someone who's ill, mentally ill, or has suffered brain damage? Can they understand it? And this is someone who's, to be honest, a bit thick, which should be by no means an impediment to their baptism and the practice within the church. They're no less a child of God than someone who is intellectually incredibly capable. So that's why in many Protestant circles, they don't baptize children. There's this age of reason that they apply. In the Catholic Church as well, you will get baptized, but you won't get a confirmation, you won't get chrismated until you reach what is known as the age of reason. So it practically means children are excommunicated from the church, because that's what it means to be excommunicated, to be denied communion. If you don't commune with the church, you're not fully worshiping God. Worship is about sharing a meal with God. That's part of sacrifices in the Old Testament, right? Why he says the aroma is pleasing to him, because you have the altar, which just means the table, and you sacrifice and you eat yourself of the animal that is sacrificed. Right, a portion is burnt. Sometimes the whole thing is burnt. That's what we call a whole burnt offering. But most of the times, you bring in wheat cakes and oil and wine and stuff. It's all food. Wine was much stronger back in the day. How they would make it, and then when serving it, they would water it down. Just so people understand, like, yeah, you could burn wine, far more alcoholic than what we're used to today. And then you would all eat, right? The major part is eat it before the Lord, is the terminology that tends to be used in English translations, right? It says that because you could only sacrifice in Jerusalem, what you would have to do is you would have to gather all the things you would usually just go and sacrifice at the temple, your tithes as well, right? You would gather that and go there to Jerusalem for Pascha, right? The Passover. So you would take everything, because it's a practical thing. You could sell things that you would have sacrificed, take the money to Jerusalem, and there you would buy things and then go sacrifice. And says, eat before the Lord. The worship is worship in both pagan context and the biblical context. It's about eating with your God. People have a very strange understanding of what worship means. It's not about, oh, you pray to saints, so you worship them, right? You hear that a lot. You worship Mary. She is a real thorn in the side of Protestants. For I don't know. Sorry.
The difference between praying to something and veneration. It like I think it's communion with the meal. You can just break it down to a really simple way that becomes easy for a modern day people to understand. Is okay. What do you do when you sit down and have a meal with your family? You're connect. You're communion. You learn about each other. You learn about each other's days. But in our society, and this is I don't know how it's for Serbian modern people, but here in Sweden, especially, it's you can see it in that low level. You can see when things on a bigger scale is fragmenting. When the children is permitted to go to their own room and watch their dummy telly and eat maybe a different meal, not the same meal, a different meal, maybe a pizza, and the parents sit in the couch and eat like a beefsteak or something.
Right.
You see it in that low scales, and so
yes,
yeah.
And by the way, traditionally, even in pagan societies, you would have like a family deity that you would put emphasis on. You would have a little altar for them. We Christians have our little icon corners. We have places we pray. We have so in Serbia we have a practice called Slava, which is the celebration of the family or the familial baptismal saint. Right. So when your family converted to Christianity, that was associated with a certain saint, and you would make a yearly feast. You would invite people over. We call it Slava, as I said. And you have the bread that is consecrated and stuff by the priest, and you would have this little icon of that saint and the lamp, right, of the oil lamp that you light. Right, it's this is all in context of sitting down and eating with family, with friends. As you said, it's what it forges a certain bond, which cannot be merely reduced to information exchange. It's again this participative element of it, and that is what you do with God. And I mentioned the Old Testament so much because it's so much clearer, because there's like meat and stuff involved. But what is the biggest fulfillment of gathering your money and then buying food and eating before the Lord? It's what's in English known most commonly as the Last Supper, what we in the East tend to call the mystical supper. There's no more eating before the Lord than literally sitting at a table with him and eating. And he establishes, the Lord does, this practice of the Eucharist, the body and blood as the bread and wine. And this is now his atonement, his blood being spilled, the body is broken, and all of that. We now participate in this meal with the Lord by partaking of the Eucharist. We're eating with the Lord, to thee of thine own, the part of what the priest or bishop would say when preparing the Eucharist. There's no greater sacrifice that could be given. There's no greater meal that one could have. And this is what should bind not just the family, but the entire community together. Ultimately, nations and all of mankind is bound together with this. This is why we say excommunicate, this, like, there's no communion between the Orthodox Church and the Catholic Church. We simply can't have it. Right? The Catholics have really relaxed things since the 60s, but still, we can't. We don't have the same understanding of God. So are we eating with the same person then? Are we communing with the same God if we have these disparate understandings of how everything works? It's not about hatred, or at least it shouldn't be. It's about the fact that we take our doctrines very seriously, and we just can't allow this superficial understanding of unity and Christian love to overcome what is truly essential for what makes you a Christian, which is the dogmas, how we see Christ, how we see what he does, how we see his church, how we are part of his body, which is the church. And the transformative elements of that are supposed to then echo out into everything. There's no religion as such. We sort of understand it as this thing you do on Sunday mornings. And that's preposterous. It's a very modern way of thinking. When they say separation of church and state, okay, if you mean on an administrative level, as in your bishop shouldn't be out there writing laws and regulations, okay, but the separation of religion from politics is just impossible. If you have any ethics, they're of a religious nature. Because if whatever you believe, it's going to be a belief system. There's no, no vein of morality that you can dig up from a mine or pick it from a tree or dig it out of the ground. That's not how it works. You have a belief system, and the fact that it's based on a book doesn't change it. If you're some type of socialist, like, you believe that things should be a certain way. The fact that they also call it like a scientific theory also doesn't change that. Like, I don't believe Christianity is some type of, it's kind of nice. That's why I believe in it. No, I believe it to be the truth. People tend to believe things that are to be true, and then want to see them implemented.
But the big problem is with people that they don't conceive it as truth because it doesn't fulfill their immediate pleasure or how they think things should be. But
yes.
That's also like, if you go just for a more easy to comprehend for people, if you go to therapy, if your therapist is good, he won't just you just won't allow your he's trying to make a change in you to the better, but
yes.
you will have resistance. So the church, this is very obvious. It should be for everyone, actually, but in this society it's not, because everything goes. But the church is not the institution that should change. It's the people that should change, and the people will benefit from it, and the whole society will benefit from it. And it have been in just in recent years, the monarchy have always been under God. The king has always been under God. That's just how it is. You can't change reality. When you change reality, it will become very, very dark and upside down, and people will, they will worship something else that is going to destroy everything in their life. If it comes to
you will orient yourself towards something and build around that, whether that's yourself or God or some idol you've made for yourself. that's irrelevant to the fact that you will worship something. You're religious by nature. There's many have said that people chose Christianity back in the day, like kings and emperors adopted Christianity because it controls people and stuff. And you mentioned under monarchy, and Sweden is still a monarchy technically. So the king or emperor is under God. That's not the case with paganism. In paganism, he is a god. He is one of the gods. He is their equal, or at least will be after death. So basically, when we talk about the Roman Empire, where a lot of Christians died just for refusing to burn some incense to the emperor as a means of veneration, you would have to say that Emperor Saint Constantine the Great chose to control people by refusing to be recognized as a god whose very whim is law, and chose instead to be under a god, and not to be considered one himself. So it's basic illiteracy, historical illiteracy for people who say such things. But it's the transformative aspects that take place. St. Paul himself was trying to convert the emperor because he is the connection between, the realm of the gods, who the pagan gods are demons from a Christian perspective, and the people themselves. That is why, people might have a problem conceiving it if a president converts to some religion nowadays. No one gives a toss. But back in the day, when the emperor converted, that really breaks the entire system. And that's what Emperor Constantine did. He had his faults. We have to understand he was a man like anyone else. But he, for example, although you will hear he only got baptized before his death, and people used to do that so they get the sins forgiven and get a free pass into heaven, as if people would be so stupid not to realize they could die on their way to church. You can't predict. Nowadays, you can't predict how you're going to die. I could go outside and get hit by a car for no reason whatsoever. So back in the day, where you had no way to contact any ambulance to pick you up, or if you should fall or something, people died all the time for silly things from our perspective, like getting a cut that gets infected. Right? There's no antibiotics as such. So the thing with him was he was trying to go and get baptized in the Jordan River, but his health started failing. What he did then is he abdicated the throne, abdicated all the imperial regalia, and spent the rest of his life, which there wasn't much of it left at that point, in repentance. He got baptized and spent it in repentance. But people read that for some reason as, he tried to wiggle his way out of it. But what he also did, and we're talking about the transformative power of Christianity. I'm not trying to make this about Emperor Constantine, even though he was born in the city where my parish, my bishopric is centered, city of Niš, back then called Naissus.
My older brother, I've been there actually.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
Every third thing that's open there is called Constantine. So when you were going into the city, it says, "Welcome to Niš, the birthplace of Emperor Constantine." It's a funny historical thing that Serbia is the second country by the number of emperors born on it, Roman emperors born on it after Italy itself. So one of them is Emperor Constantine. But again, not trying to make it about him, but what he did was, after he was coronated, he refused to go and make sacrifices to Jupiter. He refused to. That's what every emperor did before him. But if you're some type of Roman pagan priest, like, what do you do? As far as you're concerned, that guy's a god. And if he's refusing to do something, who are you to correct him? So, and then droves of like wealthy, influential, noble people convert just because the emperor did so, right? The system was broken. The back of it was broken by the emperor converting, to the point that when his nephew, Julian the Apostate, became emperor, he couldn't save it. There was no saving it. Like, it was broken in such a fundamental way by Emperor Constantine that there was no going back. He, if you hear all sorts of things about the Council of Nicaea, like, everything you dislike as a Protestant was decided at the Council of Nicaea. There's a meme page I follow that called Blame Constantine. And it's, I think they're Presbyterians, so they're not even like Orthodox or Catholic or something. They're Protestant themselves, but they just make fun of how everything is Constantine's fault. But he shifted worship from the Sabbath, which would be Saturday, to Sunday, which shows they don't understand what the Sabbath is about, what the Passover is about, what the Lord's Day is about. We may get into that if you'd like. But what he did, the Emperor Constantine, is he established that no government office will work on Sundays because it's the Lord's Day. He basically created like the first weekend or something, as far as the ancient world is concerned. So that's what he did. He didn't shift anything. At that point, we're talking about Nicaea, like 325. Everything was already moved to Sunday because Christians were kicked out of all the synagogues. So the two parts of the liturgy that used to be practiced, one on Saturday, and then the next part with the Eucharist and communion was on the Lord's Day, which is the day when the Lord resurrected, why it's called the Lord's Day. The one from Saturday was just prepended to the other part, and those are like the two parts of the liturgy we have. One with
isn't that still around in some way? You know, you have the Vesper service.
Right. We have all sorts of ways of commemorating the old Sabbath. I can't remember how you say Saturday in Swedish. I know it's Sundag, is like Sunday, right?
Lördag.
Sorry, your
Lördag, Saturday. Lördag. Well, you know, you have a very particular dialect, you know, from I don't know how to say it. It's Skåne, it's called. It's in the south. Yeah, exactly. It's 20 minutes with the boat to Denmark, Helsinki.
Oh, okay. Wait, is that part of Sweden where, like, song you say hung?
Come again?
When you say like to sing, you say hunga. Is that when I was learning Swedish and I was learning everything is like a sh. And then I heard a band called Sabaton.
Yes.
The hunga. Like, what's that about? And that confused me to no end. I've learned a bit since then about like how the northern Swedes talk and how the southern. There are differences and very stark differences in pronunciation.
Yeah, exactly. And also if you want the real, if you want the origin, I think as a linguist, you know this. It's you go to Iceland. There's the
Yes.
yeah, that's the original language that every other Scandinavian language spoiled out and changed.
Technically, it's not. It's the closest one. It's the least changed one. That's if you had me. I said Odin and Thor, and yeah. Like the practice of divination. I know I had to remember it because it's a type of divination for the Nords engaged in, but only women could do it. And if a man wanted to do it, he would have to dress as a woman, which was a big no-no, even for pagan Nords. I remember it's called Seidr. And you would just not, you just, like Swedish or Norwegian, just don't use the thing like Seidr. So I know we got off topic. As I said, I go off on tangents all the time.
And I me as well, there are so many things that will that contribute.
So the point of me saying that is like in Serbian, Saturday is subota, from like subota, because etymologically it's the Sabbath. In Greek, it's sabbatiko. And like that verb might be confusing if there was a shift. Like if this shift didn't happen, my name would be Saba, not Saba. But their beta became vita. So now they pronounce everything that would be pronounced with a beta, they pronounced as a V. This shift happened quite some time ago, but it's very confusing to people who don't understand the differences between modern Greek and ancient Greek. So if we account for that, it will be sabbatiko, like the Sabbath. It's again very present. A lot of people in especially the English-speaking world, and then specifically the Americans, who tend to make a lot of things about themselves, which I understand. It's a massive country. It is the center of the world as far as all bets are concerned. So it's not easy to not make it about yourself. But they focus on things like, oh, it's Sunday, the day of the sun, worshipping the sun. Like, okay, but if we switch it to Saturday, what, we're worshipping Saturn now? Is that how it works? All of a sudden, that's not how it works. But like in a lot of languages, this is preserved. Like in Greek, it's Kyriaki, like Kyrios, meaning Lord. Like it's the Lord's day. In like Italian, it's Domenico, ultimately from Latin, Dominus, which means the Lord. In Spanish, it's Domingo, right? Again, based on the old Dominus thing. Like in Russian, they call Sunday, they call Воскресенье. They call it the resurrection, because that's why we celebrate everything on that day. I started all of this by trying to say that we are very much aware that Saturday is the old Sabbath. The thing is, what was the old Sabbath about? First of all, we have the day of rest. But ultimately, the celebration of the Passover and everything was because you were freed from, the Israelites were freed from slavery to Egypt and to the Pharaoh, who was again a god of Egypt. So both him and the other gods. So you were freed from slavery to demons who were ruling this place. And you have been brought into a land that's promised to you, into a kingdom. Another thing that a lot of people might miss out on, Moses doesn't bring them into the land, famously. They're brought in by Joshua, son of Nun, in English. Joshua is the same name as Jesus. I have no idea why they chose not to either call Jesus Joshua or Joshua Jesus. It's the same name in Hebrew, in Greek, like in Serbian as well, because we take it from Greek. Like it's literally the same name, but you miss out on that very, very prescient detail. Like, you're not brought into it by Moses, you're brought into it by a guy called Jesus, right? The harrowing of hell, or Hades, as we call it, which is the descent of Christ upon the death on the cross into Hades, and as tends to be with everything he does in the New Testament, like things don't make him holy, he makes things holy, right? He doesn't get baptized because he's trying to purify himself.
No, that is particularly important, the descent to Hades.
Yeah,
it's very important to have that in mind in everything, because it's the principle of the highest going down to the lowest and bring the lowest up to the highest.
Yes, and it's not just symbolic. He freed the souls from Hades. So
it all around afterwards. Well, So.
Yeah, he breaks the chains of sin and death. So up to that point, almost everyone just went into like people say everyone went to hell. They have this understanding of hell like it's a place or something. And that's again not how it works. We talk about it in such a way because we have to understand spiritual reality in a sense. And as material beings, right, we have a body, a physical body. We have to think of it somehow. But it's not like your soul is like you, but like it's see-through and like a Force ghost in Star Wars, and it goes into like a place and it's like a giant pit of fire and brimstone and whatnot. Like, these are things we are given for us to be able to somehow think about it, right? I mean, think about it. If you're a soul, how are you going to be burned by a literal fire?
Yeah.
Like, you would be a material. Fire is still material. So you wouldn't be burnt. And it's not the only thing that is described as like fire. Like, it's called the pit. Sheol just means grave, right? It's called, oh goodness. I can't remember the word for it. But basically it's telling you there's this like pit, this underground, which is not an uncommon to think about the place for the dead, the underworld. Like, it's the souls are there, so to speak. Again, souls aren't like material things, so they're not in a place as I would be in a place, you would be in a place.
But it might be the closest analogy to it,
right? Because we have to understand spiritual reality somehow. As much as the heaven isn't like a place in the clouds, right? It's a spiritual reality. And the heaven that we talk about ultimately, and hell we talk about ultimately, is a reality after the general resurrection, when we will all be returned to our bodies. There's no problem with the body. This crypto-Gnosticism that has crept into a lot of thinking where, the flesh is bad and the spirit is good. No, that's nonsense. We will all be resurrected. As St. Paul says, some unto salvation, others unto damnation. The reality is how we will experience God when he returns in full presence. That fire that is spoken about, that's the Holy Spirit. Right? For demons, that's the worst thing imaginable. Not because there's anything wrong with God, but because there's so much wrong with them. The harrowing of Hades then presents this victory over sin and death, the liberation of all of these people who have been there, pagan and Jewish and all of them, who are now, the gates of heaven are open, and people are now being liberated from this reality. That is the victory that is achieved by the harrowing of Hades. Not by just the death on the cross, as many Protestants see it, like there's some payment done for God because he's angry and he needs someone super special to die to quench his anger. So the meme, God killed himself to to stop himself from punishing you and stuff like that is how Protestants view it, but it's not how the Bible views it. And this victory is what we call the gospel. The gospel in Greek, it's Evangelia. Right, but it's not just good news in the sense that you won the lottery, or your son won a competition in piano, whatever. It's not. It's a technical term. When you would have in the Roman world, when you would have usually this is about the emperor, but it doesn't have to be an emperor, the emperor himself. But you would have someone very prominent, like a very prominent senator, a very prominent general or something, visit a city. They send a herald in, and he reads the Evangelia, the Evangelia, let's just anglicize it a bit, of that person, which is to read out Evangelia, that ending is plural, as Evangelion is singular. Read out their Evangelia, which is the accounts of their victories, right? Their accomplishments. Because the city needs to prepare for the coming of the emperor. Let's just stick to the emperor. So this singular Evangelion is the apostles, which means those who are sent out, are going out into the world to prepare the people for the coming of the King of Kings in this case, and are reading out his victory over death and sin. If you talk to Protestants, what they will tell you is that it's the good news. They don't really account for the fact, even though I've heard some of them recognize that the gospel is a technical term, Evangelion is a technical term, they still maintain that God became man and died for your sins, and if you accept him, you will be saved. From the proper biblical historical perspective, it is the heralds, the apostles, sent out into the world to proclaim the coming of this king and his judgment, like his presence here. It is there that we're talking about salvation. Not like, if you die, will you go be happy on a cloud playing your harp and trumpet or whatever, or will you be both with a trident?
Just a bit on that, so I understand you correctly in this. I just have to say we have some delay. We have it from the beginning. So, I don't. So sometimes, you know how it is when you.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, if I understand it correctly, in the technical term for the Protestants, it's really, they take it very concrete, and the question I have is when you starting to elaborate on the word for the Greeks and so forth, do you mean that for the Greek this simple word implies all of this, and this is consensus?
Yes. What you do when you just call it the good news is you're committing what is called the etymological fallacy. You're breaking down a word into its constituent parts and then translating these parts and then bringing them back together. And that's not how language works. The best example I've heard of explaining this is, what is a butterfly? Is it a fly made of butter? Is it butter that flies? Is it, it's nonsense to do so. And there are things which are technical terms. A lot of things are technical terms that we use, but then we do this whole thing of, especially with Greek, it's such a rich language. There's a reason God chose to evangelize the world through Greek. It's unmatched in its precision, and how its development is the reason it was what's called the lingua franca of its day. although lingua franca just means the language of the Franks, which would be French. But still, that worked for Western Europe for a long, long time. But the lingua franca of its day was Greek in that part of the world, in the entire Roman Empire, and broader than that.
I should say, actually, when I rather read books in English, actually, because of that part. It's more condensed, and it's more alive and rich. Swedish is not. It has. I don't know why it's so. It's quite. It's not that rich.
Well, the English language is a very eclectic language. It collects from all over the place, and you see why the spelling in English is so strange, because they just sort of adapt everything, and it's almost like improvised how you would adapt different words into it. So I make the joke that spelling in English is like a vague suggestion of how you should pronounce a word. So there are certain difficulties in Swedish as well, especially me coming from Serbia, and we have a very easy spelling system. Everything else will make you want to hang yourself, but at least that part is very easy. But there's a problem that comes with that approach that English took, and why it's such, again, a rich language. It's so let's go back to the word gospel. So evangelion, as it was pronounced in modern Greek, evangelion in older Greek. That beginning, that eu or ev in modern Greek, it means good. So if someone is called Eugene, that means good, not genes in that sense, but in terms of origin and stuff. Like you're of good stock, or you're of good ancestry, right? If your name is Eugene, and then that angelion part is from angelos, angel, which means messenger. So angelion means that which is of the messenger, which is the message. So if you take it again into constituent parts, it means the good message, and you would understand why you would say good word or good news. There's also the very common phrase in English, like send word to X, Y, and Z. Right? It means send news to this other person, give them these news and stuff. So they just think of it. You can't do that with technical terms. You can't do that with even regular terms properly, because in languages, words don't have a meaning in and of themselves. They derive word from how they're used, which is why, especially nowadays, so many things are now connected to computer technology that have absolutely no reason to be. Like why you call things buts.
Yeah, the scientific mind of our age.
Yes, and then we get very relaxed for it, because a lot of science and a lot of especially like medical terminology is what we would call neologisms, which are like new words, and they're derived by things from taking from Greek and Latin to combine them into. I think there's a condition called hypoproteinemia, which is just hypo meaning less or under, protein, and then emia relates to blood. So it just means less protein blood. Like so you have less protein in your blood, right? But again, that's modern terminology. The fact that they take Greek to use it and then stitch together these words, and we get relaxed because we think that's how Greek works, but it's not. It's a very ancient language. And when you have technical terms, you can't just break them down and retranslate. And that, as I said, this evangelion term was a term used for reading out the victories or the accomplishments of the person who's about to visit the city. That's its technical usage. It does not mean good news as in any good news. Oh, this friend is getting married. This other friend is just had a son. That wouldn't be called the gospel. It can't be. It's a technical term. When
I hear you speak about this, I realize even more how connected this is to symbolism. It's the same way you have to really switch your precision of it. Your not precision, but your how you perceive it, how you go about it. It's because it's a symbolism and words. It's not a coincidence that there's no such thing as a coincidence, but it is not a coincidence that Jesus is called the Word. It's it's spiritual, it's metaphysical.
Yes.
The same with words. You in modern usage of words, they erase the spiritual meaning, and that also then the implication of everything. It's just this concrete. Am I out and about, or what do you say about that?
No, I would like to make this very important point.
Yeah.
Him being the Word of God is not a New Testament thing. A lot of people connect it to like the Greek understanding of logos. No, it's from the Old Testament. People, we are conditioned partly also by films that were made, like biblical topics covered in film form, because they make things visual, and we are very visual creatures, human beings. And when we see these things, we miss. It is basically visualizing a wrong understanding, but that sticks with us more than my arguments here. It's simply how we are. It's also the reason why we construct churches and make icons and stuff the way we do, because we're very aware. The church is very aware of our visual faculties and how much we orient everything around them. If you read the beginning of the book of Jeremiah, so we're talking about the first 15 verses or so, it will tell you, the word of God came to me. And how we think of that is that you hear a disembodied voice, right? Probably deep voice, probably, oh, Jeremiah, what we would call sepulchral voice. So that's how we think of it. Sorry?
You said sepulchral voice?
Sepulchral.
I don't know what that is. Can you just...
It doesn't matter, it means pertaining to a sepulcher. So it's associated with this deep voice that is
very...
basically. You sound like an evil villain. But that's how we imagine. Again, in films, God is always this giant, booming, deep voice from the heavens and stuff. But in Jeremiah,
I get you.
It says the word of God came to me, but then it says he put his finger on my lips. Right? It's not a disembodied voice. It's a guy. It's a person. And I emphasize Jeremiah because, again, it's at the very beginning of the thing. So you don't have to go read deep into it to get this point. But we have become so accustomed to saying word of God. Protestants use it to mean the scriptures, and that's just not how the term is used in the Bible itself. The word of God means Jesus. So when we're talking about Jeremiah, that's Jesus putting his finger on Jeremiah's lips. right? It's fascinating when you make these account for these corrections etymologically speaking, how different everything is, because it's not a flying piece of papyrus with Hebrew on it, coming down to Jeremiah. It's not a disembodied voice. It's a person.
Yeah, it's a person, but I don't know how to frame this question, but when you, of course, the angel of the Lord and so forth. Of course, that's Jesus. That's the icon of the Father, and also, but when you say that it's because when I hear you speak about this, it seems that you mean that it's quite obvious that it's saying Jesus in a very direct sense. I don't really get how you. Of course,
you mean the incarnation? You think?
And when you talked about Jeremiah and when he put his finger on the mouth on Jeremiah, and you said, I get the sense that you mean that it's very obvious if you understand the wording and language that it is Jesus.
Yeah.
In what way is that obvious? I can understand it, but it's maybe it's more obvious than I know because you don't know what you don't know.
Fair enough. So here's the thing. There's no one who uses the term word of God, logos to Theo, more concretely than St. John. Like 1 John, in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God, all the way through verse 14, and that Word became flesh. So the understanding of the angel of the Lord and stuff, that's not some, how Nietzsche said every branch or every piece of wood in the Old Testament becomes the cross. He was sort of making fun of Christians for allegedly reading Jesus back into the Old Testament. That's completely wrong. Because this idea of the angel of the Lord, the idea of the Word of God, this was very familiar to the Jews in the first century. We have been told, wrongly, that there's this strict monotheism in the Old Testament. And again, scholarship does not agree with this. The Jews became these strict monotheists as a response to Christianity. The modern rabbinical Judaism that we see is branches from the only surviving type of Judaism, which is rabbinical Judaism, which is Pharisaic. Right? The Essenes, they were out in the wilderness. They sort of dissipate. The Sadducees, or Sadducees, it's often pronounced, they were in charge of the temple. That's where their power was. And they were highly Hellenized and stuff. So when the temple was destroyed, that's it. They're done. There's the only thing, that's the shtick, if you will. So the only ones who survived were like Pharisees who didn't convert. You had Pharisees who converted and accepted Jesus, right? Famously St. Paul. So there's no strict monotheism, and this is called the two powers in heaven. So they were at least aware that there was Yahweh in the sense of like the ultimate one, but then this one who keeps somehow appearing all over the place.
Yeah, the angel.
Yes.
That's
the angel of the Lord.
Angel, yes. Not whatever angel,
Right, the one when people bow to him who doesn't correct them and say, no, I'm just a servant.
Yeah, and that's if you go by the Old Testament and you discern what's truth, what has continuity with the Old Testament, and
right.
And if you're let's say you're a Unitarian, you have to take that account with the worship,
Right.
because in Jewish tradition and society, you don't worship creatures. They were God only.
Right.
You have to combat with those subtle things, but it's for the people at that time, that was just not self-evident, but it was, the implication is there in it. You know what I mean? It's
right.
Of course,
Yeah. Right. So the two powers in heaven was the general view of Jews in the first century. Right? They knew when St. John says the Word was with, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Right? That was obvious. So this wasn't a new thing. Like, hey, actually, it's not monotheism. They knew that when Christ claimed to be who he was, they knew he was talking about, he's claiming to be that angel of the Lord. He's claiming to be the one who ate with Abraham at the Oak of Mamre.
Yeah. And exactly, I just came to how my English is particularly bad today. But anyway, I think in Swedish and try to translate you understand. That was a part of my question that I was searching for. I think, that if it was obvious for the Jews at that time that this is the word of Jesus, but with disconnecting the New Testament, but I realized that was quite dumb.
No. I understand what you mean.
I'm exploring it,
Let me give you another problem that the Jews might have. First of all, everyone was expecting the Messiah, because in the book of Daniel, you have a timeline given. Right? So you have Daniel prays to the Lord because he realizes that the 70 years told to Jeremiah that they will be in Babylonian captivity have passed, and they're still in Babylonian captivity. A portion was released and they went back, which is how God tends to do things. Gives you like an advance payment, and until a fulfillment. And the angel comes to Daniel and says, "It will not be 70 years; it will be 70 weeks of years. So times 7. So you have this span of 490 years. Now, I know people are into numerology and stuff. In the ancient world, numbers were very much about rounding things up, because there wasn't a very sophisticated system of enumerating anything. The translating numbers from the Old Testament or any ancient text is just hell. So you have this timeline given from the destruction of the first temple, the fall into Babylonian captivity, to this end point, which will be, again, the destruction of Jerusalem. You have a midpoint, which is the desecration of the temple, which happens under Antiochus the Fourth, Epiphanes, the guy who sacrifices pigs to Zeus in the temple. This is Antiochus the Fourth. He's like the great-great-grandson of Seleucus, the Alexander's general who forms the Seleucid Empire, founds the city of Antioch, names it after his son, Antiochus, and then everyone is named Antiochus after him. So you get Antiochus the First, the Second, Third, and you get Antiochus the Fourth, who wants to invade Egypt, which is part of the Ptolemaic dynasty from Ptolemy, a different general of Alexander the Great. He fails. He says, okay, who hasn't been sacrificing to the gods? We really view things through a modern lens when we say, do you know, people blame the Jews for everything, or people blame the Christians, like Nero blamed the Christians for what happened in Rome. Like, this was a common view for them. The pagans didn't view their gods as buddies. Like, we sort of view God as a buddy. He's friendly, he's loving and everything. Really tolerates a lot of nonsense from us. Not so with the pagan gods. Like, most of their sacrifices and stuff were like to keep them from punishing them and doing all sorts of, it's just appeasement, and maybe to strike some type of deal. Like, okay, you want to go to war? Well, you need the war god. It would be well to also get the let's say the primary god or something. So you make these calculations. So then he is told that there are these people who don't sacrifice to any god except their own. So he goes, oh, well, man, so that's the reason why we didn't win this battle. For a pagan, that's the most common sense conclusion to come to. Right? So again, we're back to our timeline. And then it gives all sorts of ways it's very difficult to get through. If you read Daniel, I think that's Daniel 9. I'm a bit bad with remembering things. I think in terms of narrative structures, not enumeration as such. So you have this explained that nearing the end of that period, the Messiah will come, and he will be unjustly killed. So again, the Jews in the first century were very aware of that. And you've had all sorts of people claiming to be the Messiah. So this mistrust of Jesus was not, unwarranted. Because, okay, another guy is the Messiah. Yeah, good. Great. So what he does perform miracles and stuff. But he's also accused of being, like a magician and stuff. So he's in league with the demons, so he can do magic stuff, which is a blasphemy. But again, sort of like with Saint Paul, there's a level of justification for being skeptical and trying to combat blasphemy. And Jesus is aware of that, and he's sort of, dripping things in. It's not just this flood of information. It's sort of like slow-paced, step by step, leading them to the conclusion.
The tradition of church, their way
yes.
To handle catechumens.
Yeah. You're supposed to lead people in at the pace they can handle. Like in the gym, you don't just throw a giant weight at someone; they'll just hurt themselves. But if you give them too light a weight, they won't progress.
So, and that's connected also to that we can't see the Father without dying.
Right. Also, the presence of God is very powerful, and it can even kill someone if they're not prepared to handle it. And as far as the Father is concerned, there's no handling it whatsoever. But again, back to our topic, people were expecting it. There were frauds, whether intentional or under some demonic delusion. It's expected over the Messiah to arrive. So, and it's, again, they understood that he claimed to be this word of God, this angel of the Lord. They are aware of it. It's not some retrospective. And again, the academia recognizes this two powers in heaven thing is very much the understanding. It's the conservative view, if you will. So all of this strict monotheism nonsense is just...
Well, that's a late term, right?
That's monotheism, I think, is from the 18th century or the 17th century. So the thing is, the Bible itself and Christianity recognizes there's all sorts of gods.
Hello there. Just a quick interruption from the conversation here. I will just inform you that if you would like any coaching session with me, you can easily do that by just sending me a mail and you will receive a free consultation. And if you put the episode name in the mail, you will get additional free hour of coaching. Also for personal training and diet plans. Just hit me on the mail or send me a PM on Instagram or YouTube. Thank you very much. And now, back to the conversation.
Monotheism, I think, is from the 18th century or the 17th century. So the thing is, the Bible itself and Christianity recognizes there's all sorts of gods. It says that the Lord will judge the gods of Egypt, and the gods of the nations are demons. Like, it uses the term. It's sort of a function of history that Christianity became dominant, and you call nothing God except the God of the universe himself, right? But then that doesn't mean you can now retroactively start using the term in such a manner. The whole thing is, it's not special to be called God. What's special about the Lord himself is that he says there's no God beside me. And that beside me, we sort of read except for me. No, he says there's no one beside me, as in like on my level. In the ancient world, if someone sits, you have a court, the high point of the court is the throne. And that's where the king/emperor is seated. And this elevation is symbolic of his high position in the society itself. And if someone was to sit on his level, that would mean they are equal hierarchically.
Exactly.
So when God says there's no God beside me, he means there's like all of these other gods, they're beneath me. They're created, they're not on my level. They're not Yahweh. And that it's called the stem hifal. It's all sorts of fancy schmancy linguistic stuff. The best way to translate it for us to understand is he who causes things to be. That's what that hifal is about. And in English Bibles, you will find that translated as Lord, but all caps. So when you have God saying, I will do X, Y, and Z, and then they will know I am the Lord. If you translate it, the name, it's then they will know I am the one who causes things to be. So he's not bragging, he's not thumping his chest. Then you'll know I'm the boss around here. He's saying, then you will know that I am actually the originator of the universe. I'm not some puny god of like a swamp or something, like all of these other ones. We again, something we if we don't read it, it again seems like God is just bragging. He doesn't need to brag. He doesn't need to prove himself to anyone. The fact that he's proving himself is sort of like an extension of his arm towards us. Right? He is trying to make himself approachable, but also to show that there's a level. You have to understand how high I am, so you know how to approach, and to know that you can trust me. I'm not going to be some local god that can be overcome by some other god, which is how pagans viewed things. Like, okay, their war god is better than our war god. That's why we lost the war. It's highly important to keep all of these things in mind. I don't know where we started from, but right, Jesus is the Messiah. And here's another one, which I'm sure with what I understand is you have a more not Jungian worldview, but like more Jungian worldview, and this love of symbolism and stuff.
View of like Jonathan and Matthew Pitjo.
Yeah.
They are like the fulfillment of they correct the.
Yeah. They've properly Christianized the union.
Yeah.
Okay. So during our services, during Holy Week, when we're reading about the crucifixion of Christ, there's a hymn that says that the same legs, that feet that walked in the garden are nailed to the cross, which is an outstanding thing to contemplate.
Can you repeat that again?
The feet that were walking in the garden are nailed to the cross.
Okay. Where do you take this from?
So this is part of the services you will hear on Holy Week. I have to go and find it in like service books, because we see the incarnation of Christ from a human perspective. Definitely, this is the case, that it happens at some point in history. On a different level, on the theological level, when we read like the lamb that was sacrificed before time, and you will hear this from Jonathan Paget himself, like the same body that was nailed to the cross was in the garden. You know, in the garden it says Adam and Eve hear his feet. If you look at the icon of the making of Adam, you will see Jesus is making Adam. Like this, the iconic representation of Christ. He is the one making it. You also have the whole the architect of the world. I don't know how exactly it's translated. It's basically Jesus using these tools to fashion the world. Again, it's Jesus. It's all Jesus. The Father is very rarely represented in icons. There is a problem even with representing the old man and then Jesus and then a dove. It is used, and there are miracle working icons that are that. So I'm not trying to get all technical on people or legalistic on people, but basically the way that the Father is represented, Jesus is the representation of the Father. He is the icon of the Father. There are iconic representation of basically the hand that is going, there's a hole in the sky, and the hand that is the blessing. This is from Greek, which basically there's ISHS, or that H is from Christos. It's basically Jesus, Isus Christos. So the first and last letter of both of those words, Jesus Christ. You will see Catholics use IHS, which is if you go with Jesus Christus, the first, middle, and the last letter. So it's a similar thing. But with how Greek works, you will see this sign being made by priests, and then they bless things.
And the letters is just something that came up. It's the fish symbol. Is connected with that as well? Itchy or
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes, Ishi. But it's not exactly that. The letters are specifically connected to the name, with the sign that's used for blessing. There's also the sign, if you look at the bed we use for communion, you will see it looks like ICXC NIKA, right? Jesus Christos Nika, Christ the victor, Jesus Christ the victor. But I've really got out the place now. As I said, this figure of Christ, a lot of things that are again trying to bring into human understanding these glorious realities of God, including how you have the same body in the garden before the incarnation. Because a lot of this is just when we experience these activities of God in this created world. Because he's not working on a parallel timeline, which is how a lot of people tend to view things. They sort of, we were like there's like an orb that is our universe, and then God is outside it like a giant guy or something. No, God is not affected by time.
Like most of the other religions that, the more Platonic, Neoplatonic, that God is outside time. And that's a big problem, is because I don't want to diverge from what you're saying, but this is very important to know that if you take the other position, the more, if you're a Unitarian or you don't believe in the Trinity and so forth, you have more problems without the Trinity.
Yeah. The multiplicity and unity problem.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's very crucial, because that is how reality works. If God is starting point, everything would be, you can say, you can't put these words on God, but just to understand it, God is like the blueprint of everything.
Yeah. That's another thing we tend to mistake. It's not that God is anthropomorphic, it's that man is theomorphic. So it's not that God is like a...
Yeah.
Can you just tell the audience what that means for those who don't know?
Okay, so anthropomorphic means in the shape of man, theomorphic in the shape of God. So we're not saying that God is like a giant, super powerful human. Is that we are made in his image and are like little pieces of him. No, that's just trying to explain it. I'm not saying we're little pieces of God that became somehow material and stuff. Don't go in that direction. Although it sounds very attractive to a lot of New Age people, like everything. It's that love we have for our family members, our spouses, our children, our friends. It's not that God's love for us is like a giant, like that love times infinity. It's that our love for the people we do love is a small part of what God's love is. It's the synergy of the energy, God's energy of love. Our participation in it is what manifests as how we love people. His mercy is the blueprint, that's a good word you used, for how we use things. It's not that God's relationship to Israel, both old and new, which would be the church, like that, when it's called a marriage, it's not that is a symbolic thing we say because it's kind of like when we get married. No. The marriage humans have is an instantiation of the love, that the marriage that God has with the church. Like we've flipped so many things on their heads because we've made everything so anthropocentric. Everything is like from our human perspective. And instead of seeing all of these things as God trying to introduce certain majestic realities to us that we have a hard time understanding, we have flipped it into basically, okay, so this is how I view things, and then project that onto God. And that's how you get a lot of heresies, unfortunately. But we should really see that this whole being the image of God is the groundwork for understanding everything, because Christ as the image of the Father, the icon of the Father, is how everything should be centered around, how everything should be oriented towards that, because he is the perfect man. He is what Adam wasn't. And his incarnation, his life, his actions in the world. I started to talk about this earlier. Like whatever he does, he is the one who sanctifies that. Right? His baptism was not a purification of himself. He is blessing the waters by being in them. When he touches a leper. He doesn't become unclean. The leper becomes clean and healthy. And it is still, when he keeps curing people and stuff like that, he is not just a blueprint in the sense of a practical advice. He literally is the blueprint. He is the source of it all. And his incarnation and this beginning of the healing of human nature is so crucial to our understanding of salvation, and why it's not just a mental process. I believe X to be true, so I won't get punished by an angry God. But it's this constant hand reaching out desperately, almost, for us to grab it back and be brought into this communion with him. And I think losing sight of that in favor of certain legalistic notions, which are easier for us to comprehend, especially as modern people, I think has brought a lot of suffering, both spiritual and physical, into the world.
Yeah, for sure. And it's from a psychological perspective. This is why Jordan Peterson has been such a not just, but one of the things that Jordan Peterson have done is that they have built this bridge for people to see it in the concrete, and then they're more prone to dwell into it, maybe in a more psychological perspective.
Yeah.
And it's because many people have this way of thinking nowadays that it's either or. As you know, you hear this a lot from Orthodox. It's you say either or, we say both.
Both and. Yeah.
And that's so true, because okay, you can look at it at a psychological level, how all these implications of God existing works on a lower scale, in a psychological scale, in your own mind and health and thoughts and so forth. It's just a way to subdue or erase God and create a new religion. So psychology is there is many truth in it, of course, because it's all the truth is from God, but it's just in a materialistic way of seeing it.
Yes.
Yeah. So every truth will scale on every level, and you will see it. And that takes time from a modern perspective, especially with scientism, relativism, and everything goes. So if you take good psychoanalysts and honest psychologists and not some psychotherapists and so forth, you can come a long way, but eventually you will need a religious aspect to your life. And it's not a coincidence that this is actually something that Jung brought into the AA, the Alcoholic Anonymous,
right? A religion and rules and stuff. I think it's
well, essentially the one that you said that you
need it. You need to really
the religious aspect need to be there, and that is what you can see. So it's truth on that level, but if you don't go any further, you
because you're missing out on a piece of reality, so which is the spiritual aspect of it.
And is in the church, so
absolutely. So there's like psychology means the study of the soul, basically, like psyche in Old Greek, psyche in modern Greek. Like that means soul or anima in Latin. But animology probably sounds like something you'd find in a video game rather than in the real world. And you, like, a lot of psychologists were religious people. So, like, in the Orthodox world, there was a recognition that you might have possession, or maybe you had some mechanical issues, because, like, we don't separate things like mental illness from, like, having, like, a broken arm or having some type of disease. Right? Your body is integral to your what it means to be human. And that's why it's not like you have a soul and that's who you really are, but you're in a body. Now, that is very, very Platonic. That is very Gnostic. Like you're like this beautiful soul trapped in this filthy body. Like,
Yeah,
no.
it's very detrimental to have that view. Really detrimental. And,
right. And there are parts of the writings of St. Paul that are interpreted in such a manner, like to mortify the flesh. Like he's using that in a very, very specific context. Like, of course, we say die to your flesh. But it's also canonically prohibited to, like, self-flagellation and stuff. Like to whip yourself or anything. Like, no. The body is there to be healed. And when it comes to the resurrection, we will see the fulfillment of that. But you had, like, psychologists who would, like, have some, like, a glass of holy water. And when they're interviewing someone, if they're possessed, they will focus on that holy water. They will stare at it, because the holy is very, very damaging to the unholy. Here's another through line. I had a stream yesterday and I went on an entire rant about this. The expulsion from paradise is a thing of mercy, because now in the sinful state that Adam and Eve found themselves in, the presence of God, which was very direct, very strong in the garden, would have killed them. That expulsion is part of mercy, because giving them mortality is part of mercy, so they don't end up like the rebellious angels, who are, again, they're a different type of entity to us. They're not just invisible and have wings. It's to prevent this eternal rebellion. The suffering that is allowed is for us to be brought down from our pride. We are prideful enough with all of our weaknesses. If we had no weaknesses, it would be like the demonic rebellion. All of these things that God does throughout the Old Testament is a management of the sins that people commit. This Day of Atonement thing, Yom Kippur, where you put, you have two goats, and on one goat you put your sins and you send it out into the desert, which is to send them back to Azazel, by the way. So it's not sacrificed. You don't sacrifice an animal that has sins put on it, because it becomes unclean. The other goat is sacrificed and no sins are put on it, and its blood is used to consecrate things, either by smudging, or in the case like the Ark of the Covenant, you're not allowed to touch that. You would just sprinkle it a bit. This is ultimate atonement, is achieved by Christ and his blood. This is consecration. Consecration means to set apart for a holy, sacred purpose. Sinning turns these sanctified things sort of back into normal things. They're no longer consecrated, which is why we have house blessings, why we have blessings on ourselves, if you will, with holy oil and with holy water and stuff. But we continue sinning until we sort of make that dirty again. And so this atonement isn't, again, just for people. It's for things. Things, the very material world around us is affected by sin. And if God is present there without any of these methods he prescribes for us to deal with the sinning, to be consecrated, to also this internal inward changes that come with this prayer. And in the old system, you would also had fasting and stuff. King David, when his son is born very ill, what does he do? He fasts. He doesn't wear shoes. He puts, people would put ash or earth on their head and stuff, which is just a way of being as humble as possible, right? He is the king, but he's reducing himself to this appearance, to this, because it's also an inward disposition of your soul. The presence of God would kill you, right? When you have the attempt to it says no touching the ark. You don't touch the Ark of the Covenant. And when someone does, they die. But it's not, I told you not to touch that. I shoot like a bolt of lightning. No, they die after the sheer presence, direct presence.
Energy. Yeah, because, what in a second ago, about the materialistic and the spiritual. It's an inverse. It's inverse in modern society. That we think about spirit, the soul and the body as separate, as you said. Mm-hmm. But in Orthodox theology and the truth, it's not that they are separate. They are unified, of course, but it's the same person, it's the same entity, so to say. But
and this state of having it separate, which we call death, that's temporary.
Sorry.
So this state of death, where we have the soul separated from the body, that's temporary. That's not going to be forever. So again, it's not having your soul be freed, and it we believe in the general resurrection. Everyone will be resurrected.
Yeah.
Because it's not a permanent state to have your soul separate from your body.
Exactly. But what I'm trying to just clarify was that we have this thinking problem as secular people, that it's, again, either or, but it's the spiritual that comes first. You can also see that it's the abstraction becomes concrete in matter. So it's because, like if you have a mental disease or something, it may be that you have acquires you have opened up to something that will lead you. A subtle body. That's how the subtle bodies, the demons, the angels, affect us. Is they come into us and control us. That's how they work in the material, through bodies, through humans. So just because you may be having a mental problem diagnosed by from the medical institution, it's a spiritual problem.
They are dealing with it symptomatically.
Yeah, and then it becomes physical. But first, it's spiritual.
Yes. And by spiritual, we shouldn't, they will tell you, before you act, there is brain activity. Well, obviously, before your car turns, you turn the steering wheel. Yeah, but there's the spiritual aspect, which is not a type of material, right? You mentioned the angels, like they're not, again, some different type of matter. What Thomas Aquinas calls it, like quintessence, quinta essentia, the fifth substance, which is the thing they are made of, right? Again, this is a bit problematic from our view, but it's a decent enough approach to say, okay, they're not like material. There's this whole thing we can't comprehend that they're made out of, but we materialize everything. So where is heaven? Where is hell? Like, well, one way of being wrong about it is thinking it as a giant pit full of lava, fire and stuff. and the other one is clouds and golden gates and stuff. The other problem is when you talk to someone like Dr. Peterson, he sort of, well, everything is hell if you know, it's hell when you don't speak the truth and stuff. Okay, yes, in a sense.
Really what his meaning, you know, that you can create a little hell for yourself. And that is
Obviously. We don't deny it. The problem with him is that he keeps stopping, as like you talk about, he keeps stopping at the material. And unless he can somehow translate it into the material, he makes mistakes. I've heard that he recently proclaimed Jesus is God, which is good news.
Yeah, I saw that too. And if you listen to his recent talks with Richard Dawkins and so forth, he is really on a tangent and really, he's really. You can
he's
see that
getting better from what
done with Jonathan. So it's he have had a great impact on him, I think, and yeah. And he maybe he also watched, you know, like from channels that you have been on, like
Jay Dyer.
And Jay Dyer, yes, his arguments, and also David Patrick Hero. Well, looks like a hero, you know, he's up. So
he'll be pleased to hear that. So it's fascinating. There's a problem. I think the best critique of Peterson was provided by Sam Harris when he says, "Okay, but you can read like a recipe." And say, oh, well, this means this and that means that, like adding some salt and pepper, you know, one is white, one is black, so you need both good and bad in the world, like a yin yang thing. So that is a genuine problem with his approach. Like I've heard him develop these whole stories from like a heretical view of something in the Bible. So you can, like, demons didn't care how we failed; they just cared that we fail. Because that's the whole thing. They want to bring us down with them. So there isn't a single model of failure. But as you said, like he does provide a certain bridge. The problem is you can't stay on that bridge. You have to go to the other side.
exactly.
I hope and pray that he does the same. There are good indications he will, but I am the most optimistic person in the world. So we will see what happens. But there are spiritual realities that are inaccessible from mere pondering, mere thinking about them. You have to live it. You have to go and experience the church. You may get a miraculous, intervention by God or a saint. You may. These are not supposed to be standard. These are exceptions because we fail at the things that are prescribed. Every time, one of the greatest miracles, incomprehensible actually to us, happens every Sunday. We have the consecration, well, almost every Sunday. We have the consecration of the Eucharist. That's a miracle. And we shouldn't see miracles as things that, we cannot grasp, because you can go all the way to places like Dawkins, where he says if the stars aligned and so it said, Richard, believe in me, he would think that he either went mad or that it was some alien nonsense.
Yeah, that's so ridiculous nowadays. All the atheists, they believe in more unlikely things like aliens, and it's just scientific sci-fi stuff they believe in.
Yes.
No Anunnakis and everything. There is some truth to it, but in every heresy there is also
Yes.
bit of truth every time.
You need some bait, right? You can't fish with an empty hook.
Exactly.
You need something there. But we're seeing all sorts of things. We're seeing also the materialistic, naturalistic paradigm being broken as we speak. That's in a way I don't think that can be a very bad thing, because that doesn't mean God is materialism isn't true. Well, I'm a Christian now. they can be all sorts of things. They can go to New Age. They can go to Islam. They can go to all sorts of like deistic positions and stuff to try and salvage it, because it is a compelling worldview. It has its problems. I think critical problems that undo it. But at the same time, it's not just nonsense. In the scientific realm, and I've talked about this quite a bit, the problem of abiogenesis is so grand that you have people like Richard Dawkins, who says, "Oh, grant me only this miracle," right? No, you don't get that. You don't get something that Dr. James Tour is massive on this issue. He talks about how not only can we not get like this protocell in a lab through what is called prebiotically relevant means, which means you can get all sorts of proteins and synthesize them through biotic means, which means getting them from like plants and animals and stuff. Yeah, but if you're getting the first one, there is no plant to produce the protein or whatever that's necessary. So we don't know how to get even the constituent parts necessary. And then even when we do get the parts through, again, means that would not be available on the prebiotic Earth prior to life being there, we don't know how to assemble them. And we don't know how to fulfill theoretically, the most minimal circumstances. We're not even remotely close to that. Because entropy is what governs the world as far as the scientific view is concerned. So any order that arises is an exception to the rule. And when you get such high order as to get life, that destroys everything. You will hear things like, oh, well, you get like ice, and ice is more stable and more orderly than regular water. Yes, but that is correlated with a decrease of energy present there. You would need both a presence of massive increase in energy within the system and a massive decrease in entropy to get life. And they would still rather believe this, or believe in aliens, if you will, panspermia, and we were seeded by aliens and stuff. Okay, you've kicked the can down the road. Okay, how did the aliens come about then? Do they get...
I just a little thing about that. Actually, this is, well, it sounds quite strange maybe for someone. I don't know if I should tell. Let's go with it. Yeah, I will just take it concise. People can take it how they will. When I was in this, maybe it was 14 years old, I saw a pyramid in the sky.
Oh.
Yeah. And
did it say, worship me, Matthias?
Not really. But what I said to myself was, okay, now I'm seeing this. I am really seeing this, and this is real. And then I looked away. Then I looked out again. It really was a big pyramid. And I looked at it again. And I just, I just set myself and set myself, okay, I see this now. Because those things is easy to just neglect in a time period away.
Yeah.
But this could be, you can't say that much about it because you don't know what it is, but it wasn't a satellite because it was very big and it was pyramid. Okay, so then like 7 years ago, maybe, rather 5 years ago, I think. Yeah, 5 years ago, I started to do breathing exercises.
Okay.
I have I'm quite prone. I have quite easy to tap into the noetic, when
All
it
right.
comes to things. So I did this a long time, and for health, and not for spiritual reasons, only for like the health reasons and to become more clear in the mind and so forth. It was quite helpful, and I did it for many years. But too much in excess, and I would warn people to do it with attention to search for spiritual things. With that, it can be good for the physical part. But anyway, so I did this every day for like an hour, every day, and at some point, it struck me as very strange. Because I had, and the first time I did it, I had visions. The first time, and so I had these visions almost every time I did it. But at a certain point, the visions was aliens, and oh yeah. So at first they was like looked quite friendly, but then I noticed they become like this. They try to eat you. They open their mouths, and they was, and I just, I have a quite good intuition, so I just stopped.
Right.
I thought to myself, okay, this is not good. I don't want them to get me.
I have to spend you before I forget. You please remind me if I forget. I have found a study, a pretty large study about meditative practices and stuff where people encounter these guides. And you would think you hear from people like, you need more training. You need more training. It tends to get worse with time that they encounter these entities, and especially with women, they end up. You can imagine what these entities do to them. So I've read this. It's apparently not an uncommon thing for people who engage in these things. Because,
no. Yeah. So continue, please.
No. It was just finishing up.
Okay, so I was, of course, I'm quite hesitant to tell these things publicly. Like, there is some really, maybe I will cut it out or something. I don't know. You don't know what things can. It can be bad for people to hear as well, in some way.
Yeah, people might get titillated by it. They might think, so if I do it, I get, and maybe they don't come out of that as well as you do.
Yeah. And but fortunately, I have a very, very small channel, so no one will see it. But anyway, I stopped to do it, and it also affected the physical. I got some issues with stomach because of this. Also, this excitement that you get lured into this noetic realm. Of course, it has helped me very much. I would say that on the physical level, and also like at therapeutical level, absolutely. But it's something to not dabble in,
right?
Because it's really, really because you have to ask yourself what benefit, what does it benefit me to get in contact with these visions?
And people love to have this cheat code. Like they want a miracle, they want a type of spiritual experience. Like, okay, God, do this for me, and I'll believe in you. Which is usually people see that as a type of excuse. And I do want to go to church and stand there for like 2 hours and listen to the choir and stuff. I want like to be able to sit in my room, do meditative or breathing exercises or whatever, and I get this super special thing. You can be as close to God on a golf course as you can in a church. In a sense, that's correct. In another sense, it's not. Especially because it's communal and people gather to focus on God, and that's a very transformative thing for the entire community. But there's a aspect of the Jesus prayer that involves breathing, but that's just for purposes of removing distractions. The old thing, internet magic. Now you breathe manually, and you start thinking about your breathing. So you start thinking, and you can't stop. You just forget about it and let it go back to auto mode. But there is that. But we believe that people who meditate, people who do these things, they do interact with an actual noetic realm. The problem is that doesn't mean it's a good realm or a good entity that you're interacting
with. Same with dreams.
With?
Dreams.
Oh yeah, I've much more experience with that. My meditation, I talked about this, I mentioned it. I became an atheist in my very early teens, got out of it by the time I was 15. So I said, okay, let's try meditation. Who cares? And I remember sitting there and trying for like a minute. I read up on it. And after like 2 or 3 minutes, I just, wow, this is the gayest thing ever. I just stopped. So I don't have that. But as far as dreams, I've had problems with those since I was very young, night terrors and sleep paralysis and stuff like that. And those really can be
more. I don't know how to say it in English, but you're a linguist, so Mora.
Yeah.
That's the demons that come at night.
That's mare in nightmare.
That's riding, mare that's riding you in the life.
Even in Serbian, we say noćna mora, the night mora. Right. I've had different experiences. Even with sleep paralysis, I didn't see an actual entity. I did the first time I had it. And I was like 20 when I first had sleep paralysis. I've had night terrors since I was very young. And recurring characters who seem to have a mind of their own, which is probably more in line with the Mora thing. But the first time I had sleep paralysis. So I know it's not being a child or something. I didn't even know I had it. I remember I was in bed and I had I had a laptop on like a table next to me, and I was watching something, before going to sleep. And I turned my head towards the wall, and you had this light still. It didn't have like the sleep mode, the laptop. And I fell asleep, and I wake up, and there are all sorts of like black spots appearing and disappearing on the wall, and I'm just thinking, yeah, I just woke up. My eyes are still adjusting. But there's also this like rumbling I hear, and sort of like banging on the window. I still ascribe it to just, I just woke up. You're all discombobulated and so. So I thought I should turn the laptop off, and I go to turn my head, and it just got, and I start figuring out, oh no. I tried moving my arms. Nope. So I could only move my eyes. I can't. I try to speak. Nope. You just feel like you're going. I don't know if even that sound is produced. That's how you feel. But I could just move my eyes. And I feel like arms grabbing me by the ankles and start pulling me. So I close my eyes and anticipate my bum to hit the floor. I open my eyes. I'm in the same spot. I still feel like I'm being pulled. Like the sensation is that I still feel the arms on my hands on my ankles. And I remember I read about sleep paralysis. I remember it says you should start moving your toes. And and slowly you will regain function. I said, okay, because I'm starting to see hands on the wall. Yeah, I'm not very comfortable staying in this state. I start moving, like, you barely, like like your big toes, barely could move them. And then all of a sudden I could move my feet a bit. By the time it gets to like your calves, there's like a shockwave that goes through you, and all of a sudden you could move. There's no sounds, no feeling of anything, no banging on the window. I'm very grateful that my hand was turned towards the wall, because who knows what I would have seen, and it was the first time, so I might have panicked. It's a very, very new experience and not a pleasant one. So there is a spiritual reality to it, I believe, especially with like my dreams and like reoccurring characters and like all sorts of things, when you wake up in a dream. And then consecutively that happens, and I even at one point having a whisper to my ears, like through the teeth breathing, and which is again right on my ear, and says in Serbian it was, but it said like, you will get tired of this, like a threat, like because it was like the 7th time I woke up in the dream, and after that I wake up and I really woke up. There's a strange thing about it. You wake up in a dream. And I even, like the 3rd time I woke up, I went to my brother to tell him, and then I realized, wait, I'm still dreaming. And at that point, I wake up again. And that was a very disturbing experience. That was more disturbing to me than sleep paralysis. Because, like, okay, why am I being threatened by something behind me? And again, my head was also turned towards the wall, not towards the room itself. So when I heard this thing, it felt like I would be able to see it if I was turning the other way. I don't know if that would be the case, but yeah, very, very unpleasant.
Yeah, I hear you. It's a very dreams is you can say that it's a micro death, and you will come out into the noetic realm through dreams, and you will encounter demons and angels and so forth, and it's when you speak about those things, we had many of these activities in the house that we grew up in, me and my brother. And I can't say too much about the things, but there was really, I can just say like this, really, things that everyone in the family could see on a very regular basis just disappeared when we moved out. So yeah, and
that's what consecration is for.
Yeah, you need a blessing of the house and everything, and also the dreams is a particular strange sphere as well. Of course, as a explorer of Jung, I have noted my dreams every day for many years in the past, and you can see patterns of yourself in your psyche and so forth, and that is beneficial, but you have to discern the risks and the
external influences. It's not just internal, because you interact with entities.
Yeah.
The best way I've heard the dreams described is that thinking is the activity of your nous when you're awake. Dreaming is the activity of your nous when you're asleep.
So take that again.
Can I what?
Can you just say it again?
So thinking is the activity of your nous when you're awake. Dreaming is the activity of your nous when you're asleep. Yeah. So the nous, in the Orthodox understanding, the spiritual faculty we have, in Greek it technically means the mind, but like Prelest and stuff, or the logisme that we also talk about often in Orthodoxy. That just means a thought or something. It's a much more broad term than we use it usually, but it still is active when you're asleep, and it interacts with the noetic. That does not mean every dream is like some angel weaving your dream away. No, your brain is still a thing. And there are, so to speak, like regular dreams, but there aren't just regular dreams. And you know it when you experience them. So I'm very grateful when I don't dream anything, because when I do, it tends not to be the best thing. And often, you can go through like a psychoanalytical lens and view things like something that's really bothering you actively in your daily life, and then you dream about it.
And that's how you frame it, as you said. That is the opposite when you are dreaming and are awake.
Right.
But it's not. Yeah.
Sometimes when you have this bad dream and it's just too pointed, it seems like someone's planned it for you. So again, we shouldn't be too fantastical about it. Like everything is just angels doing stuff, or everything is demons doing stuff, or it's just materialistic. We need discernment, and for good discernment, you need good spiritual health, and that is very hard to come by and very easy to ruin.
Yeah.
And this is why the church is there. This is why you need a spiritual father. This is why you need your prayer rule. This is why you need your guardian angel. And it's good and proper to approach things skeptically, but it's very easy to turn skepticism into a tool of selective skepticism for things you like and dislike. So turn it off when you like something, turn it on when you dislike something, and it becomes a means of doing away with inconveniences.
Yeah. And then that's because it's very easy to use what you like as a baseball bat in a way, and only because you perceive something as existing doesn't mean that you have to dabble in it.
Yeah,
it's the spiritual discernment and the spiritual discipline that comes into play. That
yes.
It's the same in your physical life. You don't have to eat a cake just because it's served to you at a certain point. You can discern for yourself. Do I need this? And if I need it, why do I need it? And if I don't need it, throw it in the garbage. Or just say politely, no, I don't need it. The same is with the spiritual discernment. Only because something is there and true, and maybe you can gain something from it, doesn't mean that you have to do it and use it. Because maybe you're not in the position to do it as well. As I can imagine that many people that come to the Orthodox Church in the beginning is very hesitant, because as a man, it's can be strange to be humble in a way in front of another man. That, okay, are you going to rule over my life?
Yeah. Who are you to tell me what to do?
Yeah, but hierarchy is very important.
It's embedded in reality itself.
Yeah, exactly. And
but so demons want to play. If there's nothing better to play on than pride, it can take you to the point of view where you are humiliated. But it's a demon's playground where you have pride. In certain parts of the Orthodox Church, to kiss the priest's hand is a common practice.
Yeah.
And there's a whole thing about absolute resistance to this from the Protestant realm, and they bring in masculinity, they bring in X, Y, and Z. And they talk about hierarchy, but they have a very materialistic view of hierarchy. Protestantism is unfortunately it's primarily a political thing, socio-political. So they will talk about hierarchy when it's useful. I'm sorry, but like in the feudal world, you have a lord, and that's, I think, much more reflective of reality than having some elected mayor who's just going to, steal stuff and make all sorts of deals with people around them, because that's what you're getting. You're not getting, oh, I have a representative and I will work. Yeah, good job. Yeah, democracy has shown itself to be excellent. So you will get hierarchy. When people, I don't engage much in politics, but I observe it. You get people like, I'm a socialist because in capitalism you have a small group of people making all the decisions. Like, yeah, do you know where else that happens? It's socialism. Do you know where else that happens? In every other system.
Yeah.
It's not just the Pareto distribution and stuff. I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about the fact that you will get just people through merit, and it doesn't mean a good merit. You can be meritorious at lying, at stealing, at causing problems for your opposition, if nothing else, and you can get through, and you will get into a position of power, even though you're subpar in every other aspect. So hierarchy will either be recognized and obvious, or it will just hide itself behind definitions and slogans. And if we don't recognize it, that causes its all sets of problems. So, okay, you well done. You don't kiss a priest's hand. Congratulations. You've achieved so much. But that is the recognition of the Holy Spirit that grants this priest the blessing to engage in these how do we say sacerdotal, by which I mean like ritual practices. Like they can baptize, they can. We in Orthodox we don't believe in, like in Catholicism, like I think they call the indelible charism. Like
I never heard that actually.
Sorry,
I never heard that.
Yeah, but basically they believe a priest, even if he abandons the faith, because he has this indelible charism, he can still confect the Eucharist, which makes no sense in the Orthodox Church.
No.
If a priest is laicized, defrocked, that's it. There's no ontological change on the priest himself. He is consecrated for the purpose of serving in the stead of the bishop, because the bishop can only be so many places, and serves under that bishop. And even the bishop doesn't confect the Eucharist. He doesn't baptize you. He's officiating it. He has the special purpose to do it. So he has an actual position, actual office he holds by instituted by Christ himself, and then the lineage continues through apostolic succession. But it's not about the person himself, that there's something put in him that he can do these things. He's serving a purpose, and that purpose can be taken away. We are recognizing by kissing the hand of the priest, you don't kiss the hand of the deacon, for example.
Exactly.
But also in the old world, like people would like kiss their father's hand. In Serbia, very often people would like kiss the hand of very, very young children as a like maybe up to a couple of years old, as a recognition of the purity of a newborn. Like they haven't been ruined by sin and stuff. So it's a form of showing respect to the purity.
Yeah.
But so this hand kissing is a very common way of recognizing patriarchy. Even the wife would kiss the husband's hand. Right.
Yeah.
Nowadays, we see kissing the hand as like a romantic thing. Mostly, like in most of West, that's seen like you kiss the woman's hand as like a show of affection. But it's also
become an inversion.
Yes. So you know how in Victorian England, when a woman would enter the room, the men would stand up, like so. Oh, my lady, and so you know, it used to be the opposite. When a man would enter a room, the women would stand up because someone with authority has entered. Again, that can all have its place, but as I said, people like to engage in things tactically. I'm not joyful at the thought of kissing a priest's hand, but I also know my priest, like my priest, you know, he's a very good and caring and loving man. So he's not doing it sort of like, yeah, kiss the hand, recognize my superiority or something.
Exactly.
He's very humble.
Yeah, that's a characteristic of the priests, or the Orthodox priests. They're very humble. They don't take pride in the things they do and so forth. But in a direct sense, you know. Yeah, you know what I mean. But like boasting. For us in Scandinavia, we do not have this kissing culture at all. We have
Right.
So for us, it's very, very, very strange to kiss another man. You know, Italians, for example, they kiss each other on the cheeks, and you Serbs also do it, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, and because it's quite. In the olden days, it was very common, but I don't know how it was in Scandinavia in the olden days, if they did that in Scandinavia or...
Maybe they didn't, like in Germanic terms, especially over in England, like you have the ring. Right? So they say kiss the ring.
Yeah.
But that's the same thing. You're recognizing, like rings, like the Lord of the Rings is based on this law. Like you have a ring that shows your office. Right, and if you have your seal, and if you seal something with that ring, it is like a signature of sorts.
Yeah.
So you would kiss the ring because it's a show of recognition of your office, of your stature. Right. As far as kissing the right hand of a priest, the right hand, which is symbolic of good work and stuff, you're recognizing again the office of the priesthood. And again, it's connected to patriarchy. It's connected to the fact that the priest is the father of this parish. He has this authority and duty. And if you reject that patriarchy, why not reject every other type of patriarchy? Why not? It very quickly unravels. That doesn't mean, like, there are parts of the Orthodox world where they don't have this tradition. And that is fine. Orthodoxy allows a culture to grow into its own specific idiom. It doesn't need you to have it's not magic. That's why we don't have sacred languages. There's no such thing as a sacred language. This is called the trilingual heresy. Like, oh, you have Hebrew, Greek, and Latin. Those are the holy languages. The reason being, like, those are the three languages in which, you know, the cross, you have the sign on the cross, you know, the initials, the acronym for Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. That makes no sense whatsoever. And it is a heresy, as I said.
Now, it was supposed to be understood by the people that perceive the literature.
Yeah, but again, you see how it becomes like magical thinking, in the sense of the spiritual technology. Like, oh, so you have these, let's say Latin, you have these four letters. Jesus Nazaretanus Rex Judaorum. I-N-R-I. If I remember correctly, Jung had something to say about that. Maybe it wasn't Jung. Like, Igne Natura Renovatur
maybe
Something like nature is maybe it wasn't you, maybe it was someone else, some occultist.
what does it mean?
Igne natura renovatur intera, like by fire nature is internally like restored, which is
I've
again
never heard it. But
okay. I look it up and send it over to you, but it's again just occultic nonsense. So you have these 4 letters of a language, because it wasn't like the whole thing wasn't written out; it was just the initials. 2 of those letters are the same letter. So okay, so that makes that language holy. I mean, does it make the specific letters that are there more holy than the other letters? And there are 2 I's, right? The I for Jesus, and I for Judorum. So that means that I is the holiest letter. I don't even dare to go into, but in English, I means myself.
this is like Blavatsky stuff. It's the same, and something that is very common nowadays when people talk about Christianity. They always not always, but it's very common that people look back at the Egyptian culture and they say Seth is the forerunner from the Christian Satan, and
so etymologically it is.
And exactly, that is true, but it's not inherently true. It just like as the technical part is.
Like seraphim means like a serpent, like seraph. But that's Hebrew is known as an Afro-Semitic language because it has a strong Egyptian influence on it. So a seraph, which would be like a rank of angel, is a throne guardian. But that's not because they're like snake-like, but that in Egyptian mythology, the throne guardian spirits are serpentine. You will, if you look up what thrones look like, they are filled with like serpent imagery. And that famous crown of a pharaoh is basically like a cobra's cape, I think it's called in English, and they even have a little snake at the top.
Yeah.
So the etymology does not mean that we believe seraphim angels are like magic snakes.
Oh.
That's not even how the Egyptians conceive of it, but it's this etymological connection that exists that you again can't just take a word and break it down because it's used in a completely different manner. Like a computer means thing that calculates. Okay, are we calculating now? No, we're talking. So does that mean the word computer can't be used? No. Words derive meaning from usage. That is how they can change meaning. Sometimes even to the opposite. Like awesome and awful are basically the same word etymologically, but they have the exact opposite meaning. Because awe is this fascination or this thing that has a massive impact on you, and it can be both positive or negative. Like if you
I was wondering how is that the opposite? How is that the same etymologically? But when you said that, okay, yeah. Understand.
And again,
derivative of awe, the sense of awe.
Yeah.
Okay.
So awesome, something is awesome because it's awe-like, right? That's what it means. But awful means full of awe. But one is associated with the positive sense, the other with the negative sense. So you can't say, just break it down and say, well, both mean the same thing when they mean the opposite. You don't say something is awesome today. You wouldn't say something is awesome it means it's terrible.
And also this, as I said there, about set in in Mesopotamian, right? Set,
The equivalent.
Set.
Seth in Mesopotamia.
Yeah, or I don't know if I'm.
I think Moat is the equivalent over there, or the Canaanite one, Moat.
Do you know Osiris and Horus? You know that in that context,
Right?
and you have the counterpart Seth.
Yeah.
Seth or Set.
Yeah, so the guy who kills Osiris, chops him up, gets stitched together by Isis, and she's a child.
Yeah, I know, but at the point I want, or the question I had that was, when people say that, because this is quite common, is that the people derive
Jesus is like Horus. Is that what you mean?
Seth. Seth is the equivalent of Satan, and that Satan is derived from this Mesopotamian exeter. That's so a real problem in the thinking, because it's not that strange that you have two cultures that even though they have been, the Hebrews were connected to that area, but I mean, I don't know how to say it, but it's not strange that you have two different cultures that come to a similar conclusion about the spirit of evil. And
but
then
wait, you're wrong there. Like these gods of the underworld, they weren't considered evil. Like actually, you have to take the Christian view and then read it back. Like Hades was not evil. Seth was
more relativistic.
but they were scary for obvious reasons. But people worshipped Seth. People worship Hades. People worship gods of death because they're in charge of either the underworld or the process itself. So we see it as, okay, like fertility god is good, god of death bad. Like, no. Like, they don't. We, again, are reading our view of God versus Satan back into like a pagan context. So Seth, Satan, Shatan just means enemy, opponent, right?
Yeah.
That's what it means, because he is positioning himself as in opposition to God.
It's an opposer, yes, and that was what I want to come to as well. As you said, that in those times they didn't have this concrete line between good and evil. But when we read the Mesopotamians and the Egyptians, we perceive it as good and bad, good and evil. But that's the main difference also, and not the main difference, but a big difference between the Hebrews, how they perceived God and the world and their cosmology in the Mesopotamian and Egypt and every pagan culture, actually.
Yeah. So, the Hebrew religion is the only religion which is like about ethics. The rest of religions is basically like striking deals, and justice is conceived as maintaining order. I did a whole stream on the term justice and like in Egyptian art and all the way to Justitia in Rome. But there are some prescriptions how you behave in temples and how you do sacrifices and stuff. And they had morality, but it's not derived from like a religious text or something. The worst thing for Romans was patricide, like killing your father. That's the worst thing you could ever do. But they didn't have an idea of like how you treat people other than for practical reasons. And that's how hierarchy, social hierarchy, which was more ontological than we would see it today. We are so used to seeing people are people. For the ancient world, like, okay, Pharaoh is not a people, he is a god. Then you have the nobles, and the nobles are better than regular people, than commoners, and then slaves are absolute dirt. Because if the gods were on the side, you wouldn't be born a slave. Sorry, that's just how you are. I talk about the fact that Plato showed the pre-existence of the soul by explaining some geometry to a slave who showed that he could understand basic geometry. They said, well, there you go. If he wasn't some soul, ancient soul, that is just in this body, he can't figure it out on himself. He's a slave, which means he's a moron. Right? For him, that made perfect sense. But the Bible is the one that talks about being made in the image of God, and that's what grants you your rights, if you want to go by that right. But your worth as a human is being made in His image. When people talk about like the Hindu religion and the karmic circle and stuff, yeah, that's, and say, oh, that's good karma, bad karma. Like, I kicked a dog yesterday, and the next day a different dog bites my leg. Like, oh, there you go, karma. That's not what karma is. Karma is this circle of reincarnation. And that's why you don't develop in these religions, you don't develop a sense of charity and philanthropy. Because if you're born as one of the untouchables, like the absolute worst in society, that's you paying off your karmic debt.
Yeah.
And me helping you is not paying off your debt. It's just postponed. And if you're lucky enough, you are born into a high class and you might reach some type of nirvana. But it's so ironic that all of these atheists Christianize every single culture they look at and then complain about Christianity.
Yeah, it's really many people don't see it because they are living in the water, so like the fish, don't tell what. Yeah, but I want to connect one thing there, as you said, with let's see, the image of God, and this is something I have thought about. In Christianity, if you come from a Scandinavian culture and you are more like a real Swede, that have some veneration for the old times, the Germanic tribes, and you see pride in that and so forth. You see this is very like it's a strong culture. It's barbaric. It's manly, But in Christianity, you don't have. We can perceive it as weakness, but instead it's meekness, and in a really concrete way. How you can say like because the Christian way to perceive it is more manly in that way. If you want to just talk about it in this very concrete sense, is, let's say you go to war as a Christian, you hold to a principle of least amount of suffering to do the job. Exactly. So you don't brutalize yourself on the opponent unnecessarily. You don't cause unnecessary suffering, but you have this really calm, stoic, emotional driven warrior manner in the war.
Yes, you only do what you must.
Exactly, and this is the last solution to this, and it's not in the barbaric sense that I have come to see as a very, very effeminate, very feminine,
very emotional,
very emotional, and you cause a lot of suffering, and you're angry at the opponent because they did that to us, and very emotionally attached.
Yep.
But it's a very much like Japanese samurai.
Mhm.
They are
And they were very nice.
no, but they were more, stoic and didn't. I don't know exactly. I haven't read too much about Japanese culture, but what I've read, they are also not brutalizing unnecessarily. It seems.
I would have to disagree with you that you can ask the
Uh,
Koreans and the Chinese about it.
Not
But
to be stereotypical samurai.
they're not supposed to be emotional like Bushido
Yeah.
comes from Chinese Wusher Dao, like the way of the sword and stuff. So they are expected to be stoic. But they again, that you don't recognize the humanity in your enemy. If you look at all throughout the medieval period, and you view the casualties in war in Europe, compare them to anywhere else. And this is a joke. They make memes about this. Like the worst battle in European history, like 2 people died. One of them accidentally tripped and hit his head on a rock. You look at like, and then Chinese history, emperor whatever dies, is succeeded by his son. 20 million people there. There are even Chinese historians, or rather travelers, who went to Byzantium and were shocked that, like, you basically go to the field, you fight, one wins, and off you go. And he was shocked, like, you don't go and like pillage everything you can see. Like, no, you don't do that. You're a Christian. You can't just go and pillage stuff. So he was shocked by this practice. But look at casualties. And if people say, well, then just because there weren't as many people, like, okay, compare them to Roman battles and Roman armies and stuff like that. Which, okay, it's still European if you want to go some genetic lineage, like, okay, it's still white people. But it's just brutalist, because that's, your gods are waging war on their gods, or even if you have the same gods, who has their favor. And you have a right, if you're victorious, you have a right to slaughter anyone you want, take anything you want. And all these people who are like, oh, we should be Vikings again. I always make fun of it, like, it's first of all, I make fun of it by saying it's like you think in the zombie apocalypse you're going to be like the lone survivor. You kill like 10 zombies with a machete, and you're spinning around and stuff. Like, no, you will see a person get eaten, and you will literally probably lose your mind, and you will never recover from that, and you'll end up in a corner somewhere, sitting down inconsolable. People like to have these fantasies. Like, if you were in the Viking period, what makes you think you would be the Viking? And by the way,
so there was a very small portion of the society that was the Viking.
And they were raiders. Viking means raid. Like a Viking, like a person, it would be Vikinger.
Right? Yeah, and it's I actually live in a little fishing town, and it's called Viken. And Viken is as I have come to know, is that Viking is derivative of go to Vik. A Vik is a I don't know how to say it, but
river.
Not a river, but in the sea you get like a curve going.
Okay.
Yeah, and you take the boat and go out.
Okay, like tides.
Yeah. You go to the, I don't know. You can say it in English, maybe. Go to sea.
Right.
Go
set off to sea.
Right. Yeah. Right. Exactly. Yeah. So it's as you said, it's the raiders, and it was not that.
And it was no noble warrior stuff either.
No, and it was. I think it must have been many times it was necessary, but because it's not easy to live here in Scandinavia. In those days, it's cold. You need resources from other places.
Agriculture is difficult. Fishing can only take you so far, especially in winter. I understand, like, it's derivative of that. A lot of it is, first of all, they overemphasized how many there were. Like, these were raiding parties and stuff. And they had very underhanded tactics, which made them quite effective. Like the Viking longship is famous for being able to sail in very shallow water, so you can sneak up on people. And you're going to like play, and anytime they met like a professional army, like, yeah, not wet. So they idolize everything. I'm fascinated by the fact that our culture is pushing things like pirates are good people, like Pirates of the Caribbean. It's always like the authorities are bad and we are rebels and stuff. But okay, pirates, not good people. Vikings, not good people. You would more likely be at the victim side, as I talked about the zombie apocalypse. You would be on the victim side. You would not be some brave warrior fighting off 10 Anglo-Saxon, village boys, and because you're like 7 foot tall, you have 2 battle axes and stuff. Nonsense. Absolute nonsense.
Yeah, and but you can't. I read actually. This was quite many years ago, but I was when I was like 5 or 6, I got this Thor's hammer from my grandma that I always had. I have it in a picture when I was really small, so I had it for many years. The Thor hammer, and it was we liked it. It was children, and then we became older. I have always been interested in
Mythology.
That as well, but mythology and religion and the ethnicities and faith. But at one point, I just came to. I know a certain amount of Swedes and so forth, but at a certain point, I really wanted to know the first account of a person that can be perceived as a lineage to my Swedish heritage or my origin, So I started to read. The first book I read was Tacitus' Germania.
Okay.
German. And there you have the first accounts of the so-called Swedes, Svejun. If you
I'm following it.
Yeah. So that was very interesting, and so he talks from a perspective from a whole different culture. Tacitus, he encounters these Germanic tribes, and he was very fascinated with their cleanliness, and they are very they have a good moral. They are like virtues and so forth, and but this was a quite degenerate time in Tacitus. Here in so he was amazed by the Germanic tribes. So what I want to come to is it's important to do a distinction between the Germanic tribes and the Vikings again.
Yeah,
all that comes from the people more in the human sense that is also connected to the image of God, the intuitions and the moral framework that we have from God, so to say.
Yeah, so all good is from God. It's I myself, I'm very nationalist and stuff. I don't begrudge anyone for doing so, but not at the expense of truth, not at the expense of trying to confect some narrative. It's just that there is a part of us that yearns for like adventure and stuff. So they think of Vikings as that. It's very famous, like even for people who aren't Germanic. So And again, people are not reducible to certain elements of them, but I think it's intentionally pushed to have this glorification of pirates. It's even more obvious there. There's not even an emotional element to it. It's just you're pirates. You're just thieves. But no, they were fighting the British Empire. No, they were robbing trading ships and murdering people and taking them into slavery.
And I think about the image of the Captain Pirate with the hook.
Yeah.
You can think for yourself that maybe he is a thief. That's why he got his hand cut off.
Yeah. The whole eye patch, that's more for going into the hull of the ship. So your one eye is, in the light. So, but when you're going into the hull of the ship, it's dark there. You're not going to have torches lit up in the ship. So they would switch the eye patch because their eye wouldn't have to adjust as much, so they could see inside. It's not that they were losing their eyes all the time. But yeah, that's a good point about the hook. I haven't thought of that as having cut off as punishment for thievery.
About the theater, but I just came to think about it now. Posh, I would love to continue to talk a little bit more if you have the time, but I need to go to the bathroom. My blah.
I should get going, actually.
Yeah,
we can.
it's how many? It's 3 hours and 15 minutes.
Okay. We will set up another one because it went all over the place. It was fun.
So it's really great. I really appreciate it, and I will re-listen to this myself, and because there was much that I wanted to ask, and maybe I can formulate it after I looked at.
All right, and we can set up another one in a couple of weeks or so.
That would be really great.
Okay, excellent. So thank you for having me. It was a great chat. Let me know when you post it so I share it out and stuff. It's been great.
Yeah, really great to have you, Posh. Thank you very much for coming on. And where can people find you?
Yeah, the Posh Redneck on YouTube and on Instagram and stuff. I'm also on Twitter, but if people want to contact me, it's best to do it over Instagram. It's where I'm most accessible. And that's about it. I have nothing else to promote.
Okay, great. I will put every information in the description so people can watch your videos and so forth, your live streams and whatnot. So great, Posh. Thank you very much, and hope to hear from you again. And have a nice evening here.
Okay. Thank you for having me, and God bless.
God bless.
That's the end of episode 5. I hope you enjoyed it and that you gained some knowledge, and maybe your perspective will change from this. And I will say, take precautions, as I said in the episode, with these spiritual practices. Do not intend to try to contact or dwell into a spiritual realm or something like that. Be very, very careful with that. And you're grown adults and you can take responsibility for your own actions. If you liked this content and if you like this podcast, make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel, and also go ahead and like and share it with your friends, family, and so on. If you would like to make a donation, you can do that by PayPal, donor box, also Patreon. And if you would like to book a one-on-one coaching session with me, you do that easiest by going into my website and make a request there. I will answer you within 24 hours. Also follow me on Instagram. There you will find me on the synonym Mattias Lidborn. And I also have a Swedish Instagram account, Mattias Lidborn SWE. This podcast you also can find and listen to on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, for you who don't want to have your screen open when you listen to the podcast, as you need when you listen through to YouTube. I really hope you will join us for the next episode, where we will be joined by Kyle Jordan Maxwell, who is an aspiring critical neurologist studying pre-medicine in case of PhD MD in neuroscience. He has also studied psychology and philosophy and have a background in the music industry. Make sure to subscribe and push the notification button so you don't miss this exciting episode. Until next time, bye.